Use this again. You make me. Good evening. Before any of tonight's board meeting matters are discussed, we want to address some short matter. During the course of Monday's Centennial Beach workshop meeting, Winnetka resident began experiencing health conditions that require emergency medical services. Thanks to Katie Stevens and two other individuals, the resident was quickly transported to a local hospital. Care, our thoughts, consideration with the resident, wishing for a full and speedy recovery. Also like to announce our bathrooms located in the hallway to the right of you as you leave the auditorium. The emergency exits are located at the front and back of the room. If you haven't already, sign the white attendance sheet at the table at the entrance to the auditorium. Zoom is the platform being used to video the meeting. Please note that the chat feature will not be monitored. Public comment will only be accepted in person. The link to the video will be available as soon as possible next week. I'd like to call to order the July 21st, 2022 regular board meeting at 6:01 p.m. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Shambo.
Here.
Commissioner Lawson.
Here.
Commissioner Rapp. Here. Commissioner Root. Present. Commissioner Seaman.
Here.
Commissioner Koto. Here. Commissioner James.
Here. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Looking at the link, I have this Stratford discussion item.
Thank you.
Commissioner James, depending on how this evening goes and with an interest in brevity, I may have an item for discussion.
All right, moving on to financials. We have a motion to approve the June 2022 financials. Second. Jim?
Thank you, Commissioner James. I would like to point out that our operating surplus is $1.368 million in this year's budget. Our operating revenues are $1.244 million ahead of budgeted numbers. That's due primarily to the incentives facility and the recreation program fees. Our operating expenses are about $180,000 below budget, primarily due to salaries and wages below budget and supplies about $120,000 below budget. Our operating revenues projected to be about $2.080 million below what was budgeted, primarily due to the Cook County tax levy. Our operating expenses are projected to be about $231,000 below budget. And our operating capitals and contracts are projected to be $9.5 million below budget due to the project postponement for the Elvis program.
Thank you. Any questions? Is there any update on Cook County?
So the last we've heard is they plan to get the bills out before the end of the year, but the collection and the disbursement of those funds will probably not take place until after the first.
Any further questions, comments? Hearing none, roll call please.
Commissioner Shambo,
Yes.
Commissioner Lesson,
Yes.
Commissioner Rapp,
Yes.
Commissioner Root,
Yes.
Commissioner Seaman,
Yes.
Commissioner Koto,
Yes.
Commissioner James.
Yes. Carries. Vouchers, may I have a motion to approve vouchers for a total of $582,551.78 as presented? For a second?
Second.
Discussion.
I had some conversations with Costa, not specifically, but I guess Michael's in this packet.
It's not in this packet, but I figure we can cover that under business 9A1 as for review of expenditures to date for project costs and design and operating report as relates to how this we'll discuss.
Any other comments on the vouchers? None, roll call please.
Commissioner Lesson,
Yes.
Commissioner Rapp,
Yes.
Commissioner Root,
Yes.
Commissioner Seaman,
Yes.
Commissioner Koto,
Yes.
Commissioner Shambo,
Yes.
Commissioner James.
Yes. All right, next up is remarks from visitors. If there's anyone in the audience that has a slide presentation, wants to use audio visual, can you raise your hand? All right, seeing none. As a part of remarks from visitors, you're welcome to speak on any issue. When called upon to address the board, step up to the podium and state your name for the record. Please keep all comments at 3 minutes. Note, this is not a question and answer forum, so please do not expect a response or answer from the park board this evening. If you prefer to share your comments in writing, you may use the comments card, which are available near the sign and sheets. The park district staff will accept your card and share it with the board. Who would like to go first?
I'm going to keep this very brief. My name is Chuck Downing. I live at 968.
We need you the mic so everybody at home can hear you. Thanks.
My name is Chuck Downing. I live at
Let's turn the
968.
mics on too.
Thank you.
Third time. Okay, here we go. I'm Chuck Downing. I live at 968 Elm Street. We really appreciate all your hard work on the Centennial Elder Project and your commitment to a workshop. Now, out of respect, many of us have decided to try and restrain our comments till the end, and that's item 13. While all 1,600 petitioners who have signed a petition against fences of any kind, including those composed of plant life, are not here, many are here and are prepared to speak if necessary. Would all those who are opposed to the project please stand? Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to speak next?
Hi, my name is Ian Larkin, 988 Oak Street. Just for the record, I was a park district commissioner for 8 years. I was the liaison to the Lakefront Master Plan. I was board president. It's quieter times for sure. We got stuff done. We had a unified board. We had people who weren't single issue. So a little bit easier back in the day. So first of all, I'd like to have everybody stand who is in favor of the plan. We have at least 100 other of our friends and neighbors who have signed the petition for what that's worth. So thank you, everybody. So I only have one goal here tonight, and that is what I come here every time to do, and that is to encourage you to implement the plan. The plan was well vetted. It's what, 8 years old? We had, I don't know, 5 open houses, 400 meetings, 85 in-person interviews. We spent 2 years doing this plan. It's time to execute a well-vetted plan. So let's get on with it. I keep saying this, I keep coming to the same meetings, and I keep encouraging you, even the people who weren't here when the plan was devised and well thought out and well vetted with the community. I'm sorry you weren't here, but it's time to now move on and execute on this plan. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Lori Parks, I live at 825 Lucas Street. Initially, I listened to a lot of conversation out there, noise, didn't properly educate myself, and I was one of those 1,600 that signed that petition. And I have now taken the time to educate myself. I walked to the beach. I've taken the time to thoroughly understand the plan. And I feel like as a community, we have everything to gain by moving forward on this. There's so many dividers between that section of beach already. They're ugly. You can't travel the whole distance. Tower Beach is our biggest beach and it's always overcrowded. My son goes down there and acts, but have another bigger beach would be great for the youth of the community and the adults. And I think that in the end, we're just gonna have a bigger, prettier beach and more used by the community.
And 76 Oak Street. I've never addressed this body, never spoken to anything like this before, but I felt compelled to do it tonight. I just found out about this program recently. I was interested in Ian's comments that this has been going on for 8 years. That doesn't surprise me, actually. I've lived in Winnetka for 17 years, and we talk about a lot of stuff. There's a saying at my company that we use a lot, I'm sure many of you have heard it. Perfect is the enemy of good. And when we try to make something perfect and work on it and work on it and work on it, a lot of times we don't get anything done. And that probably reflects what's going on in this country in a lot of ways, in Congress and other places. We argue and we talk, but we don't actually get anything done. I don't know who sent the lovely flyer out. It was in my seat when I sat down, but I probably agree. I don't want plants that are 50 feet tall either. But plants are a solvable problem. We can buy new planters, you can get new plants. We can take out the plants, and put the plants back in next year. But if we miss the opportunity to do this land swap, and that the financing is in place now, the deal is in place now, the property owner is willing to make the switch. This is a once in a lifetime, once in my lifetime opportunity. Once that property gets improved, this is not coming back. We will not have the opportunity to improve our community like this for a very long time. I really believe that this is a one-time shot, and we can fix all of the mistakes or errors or imperfections in the plan, but if we don't do this plan, we're all going to be the worse off for it. And I really, really hope the Park District hears the Winnetkans who really believe this is the right thing to do. We put you in power to make smart decisions on behalf of the community. We should trust you to do that. I trust you to do that. Please make the right decision and get this thing done.
Speak, but nothing better than that. I'm sorry.
Jim Ryan, the 209 Fuller Lane. I agree with the comments of the first gentleman who spoke this evening, that the 2030 plan was very well vetted. It had a lot of community input. It was well designed. And that plan makes a lot of sense. The current plan bears very little resemblance to that plan. I think that going ahead with this land swap is a terrible idea because it comes with contingent costs and expenses. And it's anything but a simple land swap. The planter pockets, which I think are part of the current plan, to me are, as Chuck said last week, a Trojan horse, meaning that if the Park District gets permission to do planter pockets, I think that private landowners could then also get permission to do planter pockets along the beach. And while the Park District may be interested in planting grasses, private landowners may be interested in planting 20, 30, 40-foot trees, which essentially constitute a privacy wall. So I agree the 2030 plan is elegant, made a lot of sense, had a contingency either for a combined beach or not a combined beach. I think that plan sounds great. This plan is fraught with big challenges,
and should very definitely be, thank you.
name is Lee Marsh. I live in 364. I've lived in Winnetka since the late 1980s. I am a dog beach pass holder, and I keep a paddleboard at night, and I use the lake every day. First, I'd like to thank you all for your commitment and your efforts. I just want to reinforce our appreciation of that. I am very much opposed to the land swap. I think it's a terrible idea. I think that all of the side contingencies about which we don't know are concerning and should concern everybody. It's nothing, it is not a simple land swap by any means. The other thing I would like to emphasize, and I don't think it's come out enough, is the public trust doctrine. And I just want to read something from a Loyola Law Review conclusion that says, the public trust doctrine has deep roots in Illinois. Illinois courts, and I would add park districts, should interpret the public trust doctrine expansively and flexibly to ensure that it fully meets the needs of its beneficiaries, the residents of Illinois. In particular, Lake Michigan's beaches in Illinois should be accessible to all residents of the state so that they can experience the wonderful recreational benefits that Lake Michigan provides. And on that note, I'd like to add that I took a deep dive today into the PDFs that are on the website. And I was very concerned because virtually all of the documents, the letters that were submitted to the IDNR in favor of this proposal were cut and pasted from a template. And the identities of the signatures were there, the names, but their addresses were not. And so there were a few people that were in the body of their letter said they were a Winnetka resident. However, by my calculation, there were 11 signatures that were people that a simple Google search showed were employees of Shore Capital. There were 4 from Aspire Capital. There were 4 signatures from Kirkland and Ellis people. They all use the same form letter. So I think we're being gamed. I think that somebody's secretary is cutting and pasting and people are signing letters and we're not seeing where these people live. Do they live in our community? I don't think so, because they're all using the same form letter. They're not writing their own letters. Then I looked at the 288 pages of people, who probably many of them were in this room, who sent in letters saying, we don't want this. All of those letters were individually written. And people can feel free to look on the website, the Park District has posted all these letters. It's just concerning to me that all of these letters allegedly in support are cut and paste jobs from some PR firm or some other, intern that's submitting things on behalf of one individual who's trying to ram something through. And finally, I just think that this is a bad precedent, that if we allow one person to do this, there are going to be people who come later who say, you did this for this individual, I want it for me. And I think that's wrong. Thank you.
Hi, so Winnetka, sorry. So I.
Can you state your name and address, please?
According to the public access counselor, opinion, PAC 212, I think like 11.
So Ted, the rest of us that have spoken have all done that, so why are you scared to give your address?
I know Ted, he's my neighbor.
I know him too, but he won't say his
How about
address.
first
I'm not
location?
required to, and please don't address me, you should address the board. It's inappropriate to address the audience. This is comments to the board. So, Ted Winnetka. So, I wanted to say that, I agree. I think the idea of merging two parts together is a great idea. Although what I said the other day, it's kind of a little bit. But anyway, I do think it's a good idea, and I do think we should proceed. However, we really need to proceed with the public's interest in mind. And I feel that what's happened, as has been stated, is that a plan came on that seemed very reasonable, but it has slowly morphed into something that is not. I am at a loss to understand how any sort of fence or planter pocket or any sort of decorative feature on top of a wall that's already going to be several feet above the shore provides any shore stabilization, provides any sort of value to the public. The only thing it does is provide value to someone that wants to hide behind it. The beach is not private. And there has been all sorts of talk about how, the Corps of Engineers recognizes 125 feet as private, or the riparian owners have access to it. No, that might be true if you were on Fox Lake. It's not true on Lake Michigan. On Lake Michigan, riparian rights end at the ordinary high water mark. Riparian owners are given the ability to access the lake, but that all is held in public trust. The Brundage v. Knox case is confusing. I think it's misinterpreted in some ways. But the point is that all that beach is not private. And whoa. And all that beach is not private. And I feel like the public has been put second place for a long time. All these breakwaters, none of them, they should all include, according to the IDNR's own guidance, they should all include ways to maintain access along the beach. Few of them do. The reason owners are doing this is because they know, because it's a bluff. Over time, the beach will be gone. Without stabilization, that beach is going to erode to nothing. So private homeowners want to do that because they still want to have a beach, but that doesn't give them the right to claim the beach as their own. The beach still remains public. And if the park district won't stand up for the interests of the public, not just in Winnetka, but in the state, then we have lost our way. We cannot, we should do what's in the public's best interest. The public's best interest, create a beach, make it nice. There's no reason to put anything higher than it absolutely needs to be. We need to maintain access over our breakwaters, and that's it. So I agree. I think the plan is great. I actually also agree, I agree that probably the dog park shouldn't be there. But, anything more than that, planter pockets, whatever, there's no benefit to the public. We should not be discussing it, paying it, or anything. And if the private landowner can't agree that the beach is a public thing, they are not interested in moving forward. And we should just say, enough's enough. You're not going to honor the plan that we envisioned 10 years ago. It's time to move on. We need to be willing to walk away if we're being taken advantage of.
I know. Well, that's on 730 Arts Road when I'm
Thank you, Rob.
Of course. I wasn't actually gonna get up to speak. I just did something remarks I was gonna give you, but the person that spoke earlier about this being a once in a lifetime opportunity, I thought I had to address. Because we've had grew up there, was about 22 years ago back. We had 4 once in a lifetime, what I heard was once in a lifetime opportunities that really worked. And I want to explain that for a second. I just got back from, I was fortunate to be in France and walking the shoreline and noticed how beautiful and clear the shorelines were there. They've been doing this a lot longer than we have. look at Lake Forest, Winnetka. Everyone seems to get by without this, this next edition that we're gonna have. And I'm not quite sure why we are the ones that are gonna start this precedent. I am absolutely, and John and I talked about this, I'm absolutely in favor of getting something done, moving now on this beach. We have things to do, but I think that 2016 plan, we can start things and move forward. If we can't get this property on our terms, or we don't get the property, we're still gonna have an incredible beach down there regardless of the swap or not. There's a couple things I just wanted to shoot you. And I'm speaking again as a resident, not as a village trustee. We basically have a couple things I want to understand, make sure I get this here and be short for this. You've heard directly from several other elected officials that this current Winnetka Park District agreement needs to be ended. And we wish we would end the contract now. This is the residents, revisit the process without any entanglements. Do it full view of the public, agree to move forward. We believe right now is premature given all the serious unknowns that are still present. One, the contract itself, a poor contract. Two, design for breakwater with planter pockets that's never been tested or installed anywhere in the Great Lakes, and that sets a terrible precedent for future beaches. Three, unknown scoping of costs to the village yet, which are much higher than anticipated and have escalated costs potentially in there to appease some of the demands of the homeowner. Four, the impact of construction staging phases on the village and our residents. For something like this, the village would normally have it wouldn't be such a contested vote. We wouldn't go forward with something this magnitude unless we had a 6-1 or 7-1 mandate. And that's another thing that concerns me. I want to address quickly the once in a lifetime opportunity. We've had 4 situations in this village in the last 20 years that have been once in a lifetime. Well, actually, almost before that, but it's been an issue that we've had to deal with. And we can do it expediently. I've heard we're anti-progress. I'd rather say we get it right. Let's start with the railroad tracks. It took decades to get those done correctly. But this town of Winnetka versus anybody else, nobody else in the North Shore had the fortitude to go in and fight and get the damn railroad tracks buried. It's changed our whole town. Winnetka did it right. Next, stormwater. The village council was driving to solve our stormwater problems by putting a massive pipe down the middle of Low Road, dumping stormwater and many runoff pollutants into the lake, even after they were scrubbed. The same group fighting this Winnetka Park District wall fought the pipe, which would have been unaffordable for the village. It kept escalating and would have had terrible consequences for the lake. They found a better solution, which has just been kicked off. We just put the shovels in the ground last week. They found a better solution that's starting now. It'll be more effective. It'll be cheaper. It will make Winnetka a leader in conservation solutions to protect the most valuable resource, the lake. It took an extra 8 years. No one said we're that fast, but we got it right. By many estimates, we'll also save the village about $50 million in construction costs between the grants that we received and the cheaper construction costs that the new plan got. Winnetka got it right, stormwater. Post office site. This one took way too long. I couldn't agree more. But it was, again, a once in a lifetime opportunity to take that post office site and get some revenue from it. 17 years ago, we looked at developing a post office site. The leading thought at that time was to build more retail and density. The same group that is asking to stop the current plan path on the lakefront discussed the benefits of use of the center of our town for something special. Something our entire community can gather, enjoy music, food, each other, parents, baby, and seniors all benefit. The same people that were advocates of putting 4 corners of retail back then, right where the post office is, more retail, are now the same people who are the biggest advocates of the new post office site development for the community, following Winnetka's original Bennett plan. So back to the future 100 years ago. We hope to get that underway very soon. Yes, it took too long, but it'll have, we weren't, and we're not really worried about the next 10 years, we're worried about the next 2. And I think, again, Winnetka got it right. Winnetka, the 4th Winnetka Park District maintenance circuit was going to be put in the golf course, middle of the golf course, where cars come in, children play. And if it wasn't for one park district commissioner who alerted the others, alerted the community, and the group again fought this and put it where it should be, we would have a maintenance shed in the middle of the golf course. And it's another example of, yes, I can assure you that Winnetka is not anti-progress. Does it take too long sometimes? Yes. But in all these examples, Winnetka gets it right. We don't do the expedient thing. We don't do the convenient thing. And I know how much work has gone into this. I do. And I have to again say, we have a chance. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. Let's not screw it up. You guys, the commissioners, have a chance to do it right in Winnetka. And I want you to do this. I want to get those beaches improved immediately. Let's get it going now, but not with the current entanglements that we have with this plan for so long. Thank you.
Susie Schreiber, 152 Glenwood, Winnetka, and former Park District Commissioner in the 80s and early 90s. And yes, there were lots of major big issues at that time too. But what I'd like to address tonight, and I haven't heard yet, that whatever plan you put forward, an environmental impact statement is generally required both before for the property and the areas surrounding it, and areas surrounding it, meaning the traffic going in, whether it be by lake or by road, and for the property itself and what will be impacted. And environmental impact statements in the big picture aren't that costly, but they do show up many of the issues that you don't want to run into halfway through the project. It's better to address them ahead of time and plan for them. And then there's an environmental impact afterwards, which is generally required for a project of this scope. And I think it would be inherent for you to at least look into what the components of the EIS are made up of. It would just give us as citizens a much more comfortable feeling if you looked at that. And the other thing is that many of us in business or in nonprofits have a 5 or 10-year plan, and that's great. That I fully concur with that. But as you get closer to implementing it, conditions may have changed. They may be financial, they may be environmental, they could be any number of things. But you adjust your plan. And I think the 2016 plan was well vetted at that time. And I know that it still doesn't have to be completed until 2030. And you've got all the time. Mother Nature is being actually rather gracious to us right now. We do have some lower water levels, so we can use it, and it's not attacking the bluff at this particular point in time. But please, just take the time to do it right, respect the citizens of the Winnetka Park District who are the future taxpayers and have to pay for all the infrastructure that is placed on any of your projects in any of your parks. They have to pay for it now when you're implementing it, and then they have to pay for its upkeep. And I think that's why I hear a lot of people say, keep it simple. Just do elder. I mean, use Centennial Elder as the big picture. Just do elder right now, and then you work your way down. And it's reasonably obvious that I'm, have a few decades on me. I have lived in Winnetka over 80 years, and if you look at the property transfers of 261, I'm sure it's been transferred more than 4 times in the last 100 or so years. So it comes available. If we really, really want it, we should look for a method to acquire it properly and without any property transfer. The park district should not be giving away any land. They should be acquiring. Thank you.
Hi, Joanna Carrasses, 476 Providence. I just want to say, when this all started, I would think that you would have used the public trust doctrine as your guiding light. And apparently you didn't. Those of you on the board who don't think it's important, you know, I think it's why this whole thing has morphed into all these arguments back and forth. You know, I also think the sightlines of putting trees and planters, and should, you know, a swimmer get caught on the other side of those sightlines, you know, rescue would be hampered. So, you know, I don't know who you're really working for. And I don't, you know, I've come to the conclusion, I don't trust this whole thing. I also think you should be very suspicious of a group of people who come and all sit together to promote Orchard 2020 views. Yeah, I don't remember them being there at the last 2 pre-meetings. So, thank you.
Lisa Claybrook, 997 9th Street. Back in 2014, the Winnetka Park Board hired a Lakota group to help guide the village of Winnetka through the development of a lakefront master strategic plan. This process took 2 years to complete, and it was led by the Lakefront Advisory Committee that was made up of 10 committee members who represented a diverse mix of people from all parts of our community. And there were 2 board liaisons, Ian Larkin and myself. And the process included 4 key phases. Engage the community to get input, analyze the information that has been gathered, create a shared vision for the future, and implement. The Lakefront 2030 plan is the culmination of that vision, and we are currently in the implementation phase. I thought it is important for me to highlight for this current board and the members of the community the extent in which community input went into that plan, because I think that there's been some question about it. As part of the overall process, we conducted over 85 stakeholder interviews, held over 5 community open houses, held 3 board presentations to solicit input to our ideas, and we probably had about 16 meetings on the topic that anyone was welcome to join. And in addition, there were 3 web-based surveys that went to the broader community. The aggregation of all this input was the voice of the broad community of Winnetka. The strategic plan represented all of this community input. I recognize that there is a small, very vocal group that is currently opposed to this plan. The previous person who just spoke talked about the people who are suddenly showing up now. I challenge you to say that this is the silent majority that has been in support of this for the past 8+ years. Take into consideration that silent majority. You are in favor of combining the beaches and creating the greatest beach that Winnetka could have. Find a way to make this plan a reality. Thank you.
My name is Randy Whitchurch, 143 Fuller Lane. I wasn't going to say anything tonight, but this is too delicious now. First, I'll start off by saying I really respect the work that was put in on the 2030 plan. And one thing that I picked up from reading the plan was that the plan was designed to be flexible. Big emphasis on that, because you couldn't, in 2014, figure out what in the heck was going to the community was going to need in 2022. So a lot of opposition is developed, not to the objectives of the 2030 beachfront plan, which is fundamentally to protect the shoreline, restore the bluff, and provide beachfront amenities. I will say I highly question the need for a fifth swimming beach at Centennial Park. I'm highly concerned that we're going to end up with a situation like they have in Winnetka with crowded beachfront. Where are the cars going to go, folks? They're going to go on side streets. It's going to clog up the weekends. It's going to be a mess. I don't think that's been thought through. Nevertheless, last Monday, we had thanks to you, Warren, a very productive workshop that lasted for 5 hours. It was very well attended. And a lot of objections were made, not to the objectives of the beachfront plan, but from the specifics of the current design of the beachfront at Elder Centennial. As has been pointed out, the planter pockets that are an intimate, a critical design element of these of the current plan have a lot of problems. Beachfront access, the public trust doctrine, the views up and down the beachfront were all pointed out. And now we're at the point where Mr. Ishbia, who is the person we're doing the land swap with, is holding a gun to your heads, our heads, and saying, basically, if I don't get my damn planter pockets, I'm walking. I think there's a lot of issues with that point of view. I don't think we should buckle under to his demand to have his planter pockets or else. During the, while we're at the Lloyd Beach part of the presentation, there was a reporter from, I think, Fox News who interviewed you, Warren, who else? Yeah, Chuck Downey and Alan Welch. During your interview, Warren, you said there was no rush to approve the current design. I assume that means the design that is currently in place with the planter pockets, and for which there was a lot of objections to at the during the workshop process. And I sure as heck don't think we should have a vote to approve the Ishbia design that was promoted in a phony petition promoted by a PR firm paid for by Mr. Ishbia, and had less than half the signatures of a petition that was formally circulated by people who objected to the plan, despite the fact is loaded with a lot of out-of-town signatures who have absolutely no real interest, legitimate real interest in whatever the design is for the Elder Centennial beachfront. So I would encourage you to continue the workshop process as you indicated you would in September, to come up with a design that promotes the objectives of the beachfront 2030 plan, but does not include Mr. Ishbia's land swap. That needs to die. Thank you.
My name is Nat Roberts, 730 Walden Road. And I'm not as expert as some of the people in this room on all of these pieces, but if I understand correctly, the sign agreement is different than what the Orchard 2020 landowner wants. It's represented by the unsigned master agreement. If that's true, I don't understand why this is not possible. What I'm going to say is not possible, and why it isn't the best way to achieve our goals. I would propose going forward with the land swap as signed, only as signed. Do not plan any parkland based on the other landowner's request. Do not do anything that is not on our land. Go forward to permit the breakwaters on the existing Park District land and off of our land into the water in a way that we want, without sightline blockages, without access blockages, and without tall trees. Design the breakwaters at the elevation I believe that you said was best, which was lower than Lloyd, and then choose by the part of the breakwater. So maybe the farthest out is rock, maybe closer in is planter or rock. I don't know what the community would think was best between aesthetics, trust, and cost. But choose whether it's rock and or planters. But if it's planters, do it with restrictions that are binding on the height of whatever is in there, and guarantee access across whatever the instrument that you're using to create the breakwater with a wide and easy accessible walkway, just like you did at Lloyd. I see no reason why you can't do that across planters, where you have short planting. The space is plenty large. And I could imagine it could be written in as restrictions, either in the permit, or you could even go so far as to make it a deed restriction. Once you know if the other landowner, Orchard 2020, fails to live up to the signed agreement, which if I read correctly, is a signed agreement. If they fail to do that, you can proceed with eminent domain, which I believe you have the power of, for the beach part alone. We don't need the top, we need the bottom, but we don't need it tomorrow. It may take more time this way, to Mr. Apatow's comment. Sometimes doing it right takes longer. But right now, you have a situation where you have a signed agreement. You have, in this situation, a backup if they fail to live up to it. And I have no interest in agreeing to any of the things that are in the unsigned master agreement. But I very much like what is in the signed agreement, which is you get a consolidated piece of property. The town gets the ability to create a beach. If he fails to live up to his signed agreement, you, I believe, in the end, have eminent domain. Take it for only, use it for only what you need it for. As I said, a lot less expert than many people in this room. I'll leave it to the others to correct when I'm wrong, but I propose that may be a way forward. If you wanted to, you could always leave the dog beach at the southern end of the property.
Good evening, I'm Vicki Apatow. I'm sorry there's two Apatow speaking tonight. I know how long these meetings go. Rob had no intention to talk, but he just couldn't help respond to that one comment about rush it through. Don't look at the details, just ignore the man behind the curtain. So I'm sorry that both of us are speaking at the same time, because that's a lot to ask of the public. I am so thrilled to see this group that's all sitting together. I did 7 meetings, and we've been waiting for someone to come and talk and say why we should be doing this plan. We've heard for hours and hours and hours from the public why we shouldn't do it and why it's a bad plan. But what I realized is we all have a lot in common, because residents want to see a wonderful Elder Centennial Beach. We want to see beautiful parks up there. What we all are having the one struggle with is how to do it. Now, I can tell you, I, with Mary Garrison and several other members of my garden club in Winnetka, 15 years ago, 16 years ago, that property came on the market for about $3 million. And we went to Mary at the Park District and we said, Mary, this is a chance of a lifetime. We can buy this property. Remember the gentleman, I'm not sure, I don't know your name, but who said this is a once in a lifetime opportunity? It's actually about the 3rd time this has come up just since I moved here 22 years ago. So it might come up again if it doesn't happen this time. We went to the Park District, they're like, yes, let's buy it. We would have had all of that property to ourselves, one unlimited vista, no house in the middle. We wouldn't have had to give up anything. And right now, what we're being asked to give up in order to do this land swap is the most beautiful section of Centennial Park. and the best beach on the Elder Centennial, the one that doesn't flood, the one that does have sand all the time, that's where we're giving to Mr. Ishbia. The Centennial Park, the part of the park with those gorgeous 100-year-old trees, that's what we're giving to him, and he's giving us a dumpy old house that's falling apart with a bunch of asphalt that we're gonna have to pay a fortune to upgrade. So that aside, we went to the public and we did an actual advisory a non-binding referendum. We put it on the petition for all the residents of Winnetka to vote on. It was very simple. Would you approve for the park board to spend $3 million to buy that property at 261? We thought it was a slam dunk. Everybody wants it, right? Because we've heard from several people that people want this. It got voted down. The residents voted against buying that property for $3 million so we can combine those beaches and parks. I was brokenhearted. So I had worked for a long time to try to combine these beaches and parks. This is not the way to do it. Getting in bed with a private homeowner who's trying to dictate all of the minutia that's going on with this is unacceptable. And the municipalities are supposed to be representing the people and not one private landowner. And that's what's happening here. And that's why we're all upset. Because if we just got rid of that one piece of the puzzle, we could continue to work together as a community and all be in this together to come up with the best plan. And we're being stymied. So I've been to, I think, 6 or 7 meetings now, some of them 5 hours. I don't know how many of you were down in Centennial and Lloyd. I see a lot of people who were there. We put a lot of time and effort to this. So when Teresa says something to me, which is very egregious because we're all residents, we all have to live here together. The group of people who continue to try to minimize other residents in this town and say, oh, those are the dog beach people, like they're less important than the rest of us. Oh, those are the small but vocal minority. Well, I can tell you right now, I printed out both petitions, and one of the things that really bothered me was the petitions, when they come in from change.org, they say the name of the resident and what town they're from. And we know that because the petition that Rebecca Ferguson did it's up to about 1,642 signatures now. It listed name, town, so we knew who was from Winnetka. So on Friday, the petition that was called by the park district, Ishbia's petition, which, what does that tell you? Our petition was an organic petition from the residents. It started from a grassroots level. It wasn't something that was designed by a PR group to try to mislead people into thinking this was a good deal. So the petition that came in had the names and towns on it, but guess what? When it came in the board packet, all those towns were missing. To me, that is not a very transparent or honest way to treat the public of Winnetka. We should know, just like we do with the 1,600 signature petition, where these people are from. So I did a little bit of analysis of the numbers. It took forever because I had to look for every town and sort and go through it. And here's what it comes up with. So Teresa, when you say the small but vocal minority, these are the facts. And I wish you would stop trying to divide the community and respect everyone's opinion. Everybody has a right to their opinion, whether it's for or against this plan. So the facts are that the petition that Mr. Ishbia has put out, when it was submitted to the park district, it had 443 signatures. 139 of those are from Winnetka, and 303 are from communities all over, Chicago, other countries, other states, whatever. The petition that Rebecca Ferguson actually put into the record is currently at about 1,642 signatures. 860 of those are from Winnetka. So do the math. 139 on the petition for this plan and 860 against the plan. By my math, that's 8-1 against this plan. That is not a vocal minority. And you need to stop calling it that. You need to recognize that when all these people talk against this plan, just like Ian said, his voice is representing 100 of the people that aren't here. This is representing the 1,600 that aren't here. So when you hear someone talk against this plan, think 1,600 people. Just like Ian said, think 100 for the group that's for it. We've got 1,600 that's against it, 8-1 against. So first of all, I think it's unacceptable that the park board scrubbed those towns from the information that was put in the public. I know, I'm sorry, I'm talking way too long. And you're right, I should stick to my 3 minutes. And several other people have spoken more than that, so I did take some liberties. Step, thank you.
I'll see by time.
Thank you very much. We can't do that unfortunately by the rules.
Allow me to conduct the meeting, please. Vicky, if you could wrap up quickly.
Thank you, Warren. I appreciate that. So all I'd like to say in the final, my final notes is that we expect this process to be transparent and honest. We've asked the park board to please be more transparent in the information. I was very disappointed that the petition is on the agenda tonight. They've never asked for our petition to be on the agenda. We've never been to speak on behalf of our petition. Rebecca's had to come in public comments and actually submit it every single time. So when I saw that this new petition, the 400 signatures on the agenda, I had to ask why. We'll find out during the meeting, but it's a little surprising. Thank you very much.
Anyone else who would like to speak? You'll have another chance near the end of the meeting. There is a lot of business for this board to get through.
My name is Kate Dexter, and my husband is Bill Draco, and speaking on behalf of him as well. I'll be quick, because everybody wants quick now at this point, but we moved to Winnetka in 2007. When we moved to Winnetka in 2007, one of the key reasons we moved here was for the beaches. We moved into a house that sat on Oak Street, 852 Oak. When we were barely in the door, all of the talk of town had to do with the post office. And when we were going to change that ugly post office that is in the middle of our town into something beautiful and special and great for the residents. Today, that ugly thing is still there. And maybe now we're finally going to move them out of that building, but that has been around forever. And we've just been stuck. This town gets stuck in all of these things that are meant to actually make our lives better. I just want to speak out in support of the current plan and say, I just want my kids to enjoy the beach before they can grow up and move away. I want them to actually get there now and get some benefits of this. So I wish we could just move forward.
No further comments at this time. Let's move on to approval of minutes. May I have a motion to approve the closed session meeting minutes of May 12, 2022 as presented? Is there a second? Any discussion?
Laura, I'm sorry, Alexander didn't realize we were closing comments.
No, I'm Alexandra Nichols, at 900 Mount Pleasant, next. I've sat through 6 or 7 of these meetings with great disappointment and actual anger at the way this whole process is proceeded. It hasn't been transparent, in my opinion, it's not honest. And I think there's a whole lack of moral compass in this group. And I think there's a lack of full ethics. When you look at what's right, I looked at the mission of the Winnetka Park District, and it's to preserve the property as best we can for the benefit of residents of our village and the beauty of them in our 3 greatest assets, our parks, I think our park districts and our beaches. We are so grateful to have so many powerful things. And the fact that we go over these different plans that you keep presenting with completely undesirable and totally unacceptable components. And we've had one meeting after another, we've had a vote where people have assigned their names. And it doesn't seem to matter whatever the people of Winnetka do, you don't pay any attention. You're doing a plan that you're jamming through that the majority of the people in this village do not support. You have seen that over and over and over again. And I don't know what this final plan is going to look like. I don't know where you are. I'd like to know for you to present where you are. But I can tell you on what I have seen,
and the lack of my trust in this decision and the whole process with Ishmael, which I don't think has been honest. He has been the deciding factor on all these unacceptable additives, which we should never, ever consider. Anything that blocks our beaches in violation of everything we know about our shores. We protect them, they are open to the public. And if this plan goes forward and you're presenting, and you are blocking those beaches and having those planter boxes on the corner, I have no respect for that. And I'd like to say that if any of you on this commission are voting for this plan, I would like to say respectfully, I think you should consider resigning from our council. Because the public elected you. And you should serve the public for which you were elected. And I don't think they're doing that. Thank you.
We have a motion and a second, the approval of minutes. Is there any comment? We've had, why don't we do this one by itself? Because we have had so many meetings in rapid succession, and we have been answering the prayer requests. Our staff has been absolutely quiet. We are respectful of the enormous commitment that Libby and others have made to this community. It has been,
So we just got a lot going on. We have a lot going on.
We have a lot going on.
We have a lot going on.
So I'm ever grateful for Libby's efforts. So this is the only one that we have ready.
Perfect.
So any further comments? All right, roll call.
Commissioner Rapp,
Yes.
Commissioner Root,
Yes.
Commissioner Seaman,
Yes.
Commissioner Koto,
Yes.
Commissioner Archambault,
Yes.
Commissioner Bussin,
Yes.
Commissioner James.
Yes. Carries. Release of closed session minutes. And motion to approve the release of the redacted closed session minutes from January 10th, 2019, April 28th, 2022, as previously consented to by each commissioner.
So moved. Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Yes, please.
I think in some of my discussions in public, there's been, what is there anything for that? My understanding was because we redacted some personal information on non-elder centennial topics. That's what was redacted. All elder centennial related topics are on redacted.
Right. So in case anybody didn't hear that, we have already released all the closed session meeting minutes from January 10th, 2019 through April 28th, 2022. We have redacted only that information that is not germane to elder centennial. There is nothing that this board has to hide. By virtue of our release of these closed session meeting minutes, you can see all the difficulties that we've had in negotiating this contract. Would like to add that for those who have some concern over the transparency, the contract, the exchange agreement itself contained confidentiality provision. And thus, we were also in very contentious proceedings, including with the threat of litigation, bring an action against HBO for enforcement of the contract. Those types of discussions are inherently confidential to be conducted in private. Therefore, we did that in executive session. You can read all about it, it's released all of it. There is nothing this board has to hide from you. We are doing the people's work in the most difficult circumstances. So any further discussion? Roll call.
Commissioner Root,
Yes.
Commissioner Seaman,
Yes.
Commissioner Koto,
Yes.
Commissioner Archambault,
Yes.
Commissioner Bussin,
Yes.
Commissioner Rapp,
Yes.
Commissioner James.
Yes. Motion carries. On to communications, Mr. Peterson.
You have in the packet many articles from publications as well as emails received from our last committee of the whole and board meeting. So we're tracking all the email communications that come in and presenting them to the board. So those comments and communications are in your packet.
You want to pull the mic?
Just wondering if there's a status update on the FOIA request.
I don't think that mic's on yet.
Yep, so you were asking if there's a status update on the FOIA request, probably for Irene Smith.
Any others
Any
that
other-
we've received?
All of their FOIA requests have been satisfied according to council, based on the information provided by, to date, provided by, committee members, commissioners, and or staff members.
Okay, and then also the Army Corps comments.
So those came in and we're in the process of redacting the information that needs to be redacted, the personal information. Those will be posted probably by Monday, Tuesday latest.
And John, if we had all commissioners submit their personal correspondence, written form, text.
We're in the process of assessing that, so we'll have more on that in our next review. Anything else in communications? All right, we've done unfinished business. First up, Elder and Centennial, review of expenditures to date and projected costs, design and construction options to move forward. Costa?
Warren, thank you. So I can move to that.
That'd be great. Yes, please.
Warren, thank you. In the packet is included a breakdown from 2019 to current of everything that has been built out towards the Elder Centennial project. The one thing that I would like to speak on behalf of is a question that David Seaman had brought to my attention regarding an invoice for Michael's for $30,000. That invoice was for marine engineering work that we had contracted with Michael's to complete. After extensive reviews and trying to understand the best marine structural engineer around, it was best delivered by our coastal consultants, Shavik Associates, as well as correspondence through other measures to work with Michael's because they are the best. And if you're considering that as an opportunity, it would make sense for them to better understand the project as best as possible. The work that was, or the scope of work that was called out for the 30,000 was preliminary engineering for the following sheet pile structures: the concrete pier, the north planning pocket, the south planning pocket, western sheet replacement, vehicle access ramp north adjacent to the planting pocket, line drawings accompanied by narratives and prepared for submittal for permit applications, summary reviews of each scope of work, engineering drawings and construction drawings as needed for the project. That was the scope of work that was identified. I reviewed the board approval from the August 26th correspondence when the park board voted 6-2 or 6-0 and 1 abstaining to move forward with progress, just like we did with work that we contracted with Coda Group, Shavik Associates, and Space Co, as well as Christopher Burke Engineering. I looked at this as part of the due diligence to construct, and not to construct, but to put the plan pocket, or put the packet together to get to permit. The engineering, the drawings, and everything else to support that. So that's where that came from. I reviewed that with my direct report, which is John Peterson, and I also reviewed that with Warren James at the time of approval. Got authorization to move forward and move forward with the request.
Yeah, listen, I reviewed the vouchers. And for everybody in the audience, it's what, 25,000 and below, you don't have to come to the board for approval. If it goes above 25, you do. But this was a $30,000 bill. But our policy document has some conditions where a bill above 25 can actually, well, not go to the board for approval. I would suggest, considering some of the sensitivities about expenditures on Elder Centennial, that, I looked at the policy documents 431519714, that I think going forward, if there are any expenses above the $25,000 threshold, that we should come to the board, regardless if it's an existing relationship. It's the cumulative number of these bills with our various suppliers, vendors, as you can tell by this spreadsheet, have gotten quite substantial now over a period of time, right? This has been, I'll call it almost, well, let's call it 3 years. So it's been considerable bills, considerable period of time. I would prefer from a control standpoint, a transparency standpoint, that anything above 25, regardless of the existing relationship, you come to the board and say, hey, so it keeps the board more informed. So that would be my suggestion.
So that particular expense was on a voucher that was approved and then presented to the board and approved by the board. But I think what you're asking for is to have a greater level of transparency beyond that.
Right, that's right, it was. And I approved the voucher, and it wasn't a packet.
But it wasn't as itemized or singled out in a manner that connects it back to.
Similarly, what we would do for a $30,000 piece of machine. I think that could go a long way.
Not a problem. I will note that just earlier this year, Governor Pritzker did include Public Act 102-0728, which effectively allows boards to increase that threshold to 30,000. And I know with pending policy review that's going to be coming up for that chapter, we can identify what the correct threshold is and the correct implementation for that threshold as it relates to services and goods being purchased versus engineering and other services that don't necessarily meet that requirement, but would definitely come before the park board as I'm here tonight.
I have a bunch of questions, but first and foremost, I would like to correct some of the information about the vote that everyone keeps referring to on August 26th as the endorsement of the design for this project. Okay, that vote specifically took place under agenda item 9A, consideration for dog beach and off-leash, off-beach dog park. That vote was not a design review for this project. It has been referred to as that multiple times, and I just want to make sure that it's crystal clear that that was not an endorsement to go forward with this design.
I made the motion. That motion was to confirm the land use, which included a non-motorized swimming in the north, non-motorized boating in the north, and swimming in the south. It was directly at point to the dog beach question. That's it.
Okay, because it concerns me to hear that that vote is justification for a $30,000 expenditure, particularly since some of the expenditures appear to have even, in fact, predated that vote.
That vote was consistent with to reaffirm 2016 master plan and uses of the property. And I understand that both you and Colleen were recent to the board. This process started much sooner, and we will move forward with the design development of plans. And those plans have not changed substantially since April of 21. Michael's was deemed, because they've done the work at Lloyd, deemed most familiar and thus best suited to quickly develop and most efficiently, cost-effectively develop structural engineering plans that were necessary to develop a complete estimate and permit that.
May I correct the record, please? In light of information that has been distributed thanks to the FOIA request by Irene Smith, it would appear that this plan predates the date that you just gave by several months. It rather looks like middle December of 2020, we have a design that had planter pockets and a fence. And so I just want to correct the record of that.
My comment was the plans have changed since April. That's why it's in substantial manner since April 2021. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, I want to get on, I really want to get on. We have a bunch of information to cover. I think cost was something people are very interested in. Will you please proceed to projected cost, design, and construction options to move forward?
So Warren, with that note, I apologize. I was
looking under the date and the cost design construction options as we move forward here. And to address Commissioner Stevens' question from earlier, I just wanted to get that topic covered. I put together a brief memo here on the handout to the park board, basically stating where we were back in early 2021, the project cost there. At that time, the estimated project cost with a 15% contingency was $9.3 million to erect both structures, the Elder and Centennial structure, including the center T pier, relocated stormwater discharge, planter pockets, sand backfill, concrete access ramp to the north, and access ramp down to the project to allow for a land-based construction. As I suggested, that was including a 50% contingency as we know it. From there, the project, we included some additional construction costs due to timing, because now from early 2021, when the first quote was, I believe it was from February of 2021, we fast forward to where we were a little while ago, and the increased construction costs due to timing and allow for the future build out of the elevated boardwalk price for the project increased $1.5 million. So the phase 2 improvements would include the elevated boardwalk, which is the length of the combined beaches, the non-motorized storage racks, the seating concessions that would need to be completed for future, as future funding became available. So that was the ability for us to put in the shoreline protection, basically the sheet piling, in addition to the original phase of work, which increased it by $1.5 million, which brought the total to $10,800,000. Once again, that is with a 15% contingency.
I'm sorry. What's in the 1.5 number?
The 1.5 was the additional sheet piling that was identified along the shore protection, and as well as to build out the future for the additional work for the boardwalk that was proposed as phase 2. Boardwalk phase 2 is not included in this total, and that would only come online with additional dollars as they became available, whether it was grants or bonds or private donors, however that might have been available. Currently, there has been a couple different design iterations that have been discussed. I've looked at this in a lot deeper analysis, looking from the original cost on February 10th, 2021 to the more updated cost for the plan as it was proposed and submitted for the permit or resubmitted for the permit review from the notes and revisement from April 11th, 2022 to some of the questions and the ideas that came out of the open session. Some of those ideas we have yet to vet out in the next public forum, so I'm going to reserve those price totals to be put out with the next workshop section to show those individual totals as part of a presentation corresponding to each unit cost for each unit that we're looking to include, whether it be our different designs of the south breakwater, different designs of the north breakwater. Hearing once again what we heard from the community, no planting pockets, potentially stone ribbons all the way back, carrying lower heights of stone, trying to limit them on the steel, making sure we're taking into consideration of carrying rights and access to north and south beaches beyond the public boundaries, and including but not limited to the conjoining of the two parks and identifying the furthest boundaries which we can construct while keeping all the amenities, or in this case, all the build out on our district property. And that's where that next iteration is going, all the way to a point where I sat down with Shanika, associates today, to help further that as we continue down that road. So staff is taking this very seriously and is looking forward to our next workshop meeting to then re-engage the public to show them what we can do.
I was certainly able to distribute the memo. I don't know about everyone else, but it's kind of hard to follow the numbers without them.
He literally just completed it. We'll get it to you right now, and then we'll put it in the meeting packet. Thank you, Coach.
I just want to thank Lisa. I know it's done numerous iterations of costing out this project and various options.
Is there any other questions for me at this time?
I had some more questions on the costs. Just that previously the board had approved contracts with Shanika and Winnetka, and just looking at the spreadsheets, it's unclear to me because I see a 90% completion payment and then also a final payment for Shabika. And, on this project, it looks like we've spent, $107,000 with them collectively. Are we at the end of those contracts and will you be putting forth a new contract, or what is the status? Like, what other costs can we expect from Shabika? Should we expect to see a new proposal based on where we are?
So currently where we're at, the first design proposal that came from Shabika was just that, it was the design proposal on the overall view of the site. The second proposal that came through from Shabika was to move through the permitting and to help the park district work through the permitting requirements to get ultimately a permit to construct the design. That's the second one you're seeing here being charged off. Where we are at currently by removing or pulling the permits for both the core and the IDNR, and in turn for the IEPA as well, and the NWRD, if we change the design significantly, we will have to re-engage the coastal engineer to reaffirm the design that we go with, to make sure that the quantities are correct, make sure the design is correct, make sure the engineering will be supported and it can sustain not only the current foundation lake, but also the 200-year storms and everything else that can come with the lake events as they evolve, the high and low water elevations, as well as the amount of sand that needs to be backfilled and everything else, taking a look and considering the amount of, the sand monitoring that goes along with that. We have to re-engage if there's substantial changes to the MWT permit as well with Christopher Burke Engineering, based on if we change the design of the elder breakwater and what that might look like. So there's additional fees that are going to be actually occurred by stopping and reset. And when we hit reset and we redesign, we're going to in turn incur additional costs for that. So some of those don't carry over to the next plan because the plan will potentially submit the design change.
So would that be subject to coming to the board? Because I would assume it's going to be more than 25 grand.
Any proposals would be in front of the board based on the 25,000 rule that we discussed.
Cynthia, I believe we are done with the existing contract with as it applies to others.
There was one final payout for the current permitting that they had actually submitted this morning from their office because we're closing it out. That was the last piece.
Okay. And then I also noticed that we had, approved a fair amount of work with Lakota, over 100,000, but also included in their proposals for work for Lloyd. But it looks like we paid out about 100,000 to Lakota for Elder Centennial. Should we be expecting another document from them with a new proposal with different designs, or because I feel like over the years we've had, like in 2019, I think we had a contract with them for 250,000. Then we have this one for 100, and like, at least as a newer board member, I'm not familiar with the work product output from those investments. And it's unclear to me, what needs to be done, what needs to go ahead. I see that they also kind of include some of the quotes from Space Co. in their proposals. So are we paying those, all under Lakota, but then I see separate charters for Space Co. Like, what should we be expecting to see in terms of other forward-thinking costs?
No problem. So as we continue down this path, any proposals that will be to re-engage any design firms, whether it be from a coastal design perspective, whether it be from a architectural or landscape perspective, designer work that Lakota provides for us, or whether it be civil engineering that sometimes is a subcontractor to Lakota, Space Co is, or what you have seen currently is work that we provided or paid out directly to Space Co. was work for the stormwater discharges, civil engineering to do that, and then Christopher Burke Engineering was supported under them as a subcontractor. Any of those continued dialogue as we move forward will come back to the board and their scope of services or do not exceed amount total based on whatever that new scope of work is to be determined. And that will be based on determination of what we work out through the workshop sessions, and work is needing to be completed or changed, work that we can reuse or possibly repurpose what we've done already to save cost, but also new work that might need to be proposed would come as additional fees. And that would all be coming in front of the park board.
Yeah, I understand that all of this is very fluid at the moment. But if we're talking about new work where we need new design and new engineering, this commissioner would be most grateful if we might expand our scope of possible service providers. So that we might look beyond some of the traditional providers, just in a bidding context, to see if we might be able to save some money. It's just a thought.
Steve, do you have something you want to say?
Yeah, I just had a quick question, Costa. The dollar figures that you included in your memo for the estimated price of the project, does that include soft costs, design, engineering, et cetera?
That is hard cost of construction alone. There's no soft cost.
Would it be possible for you to generate estimates at some point in the future for the soft costs?
Yes.
That might be a good idea, so that even if it's something that's subject to change as the design evolves, it might be helpful to the board to see what we project those numbers to be at this point in time based on the information we have.
Definitely provide that to the board.
I'd just like to comment, say thank you, Costa, and to confirm our prior discussions that there is a high degree of volatility in construction costs these days. So we have asked Costa and our suppliers to provide unit pricing for tons of stone, cubic yards of sand, linear feet, sheet pile, so that we can evaluate various iterations of the plan as we contemplate different solutions and can rapidly develop construction cost estimates so we can make better informed decisions. So I appreciate your efforts working towards that. Of course, I look forward to seeing that at the next workshop.
So just to comment on that, and we'll probably talk about this because I have it on my list a little bit later, but Highland Park recently bid out a boat launch improvement / breakwater project, and they have a full analysis of all of their bids that includes unit cost information for a lot of the things that we're looking for. And I just want to point out that for their project, they put their bid out in February 2022. They're expected to begin construction in the fall, and there were 6 responsive bidders, and there was a huge range of costs for their project. I was shocked that the total base proposal that they went with was 2.265. The most expensive one was 4.186 million. So in the first project of a similar size to Lloyd, that was a huge range of cost.
Just a comment, because it's been my world development. If you look at what happened in the village, they bid out the stormwater project. They only got 3 bids, ranging from 32 million down to some 20 million or thereabouts. The timing of bidding of the project is critical that it be early in the season. So the February bid is a very good time where people aren't already booked up with the season. Even earlier than that is essential. Go out late, people already booked, they throw in a big number. Hey, if I get it, I'll figure out a way to do it. So that's why you see a wide range of bid differences. People that are hungry, need to work, versus people who are already booked.
Okay, I'm just setting the expectation that for this project, I want to be.
We want to be
in the early
early,
stage.
we want to be early, and we want lots of bids.
Yes.
Great, totally agree. All right. Any other questions for Costa on the cost? Steve, on the status of the property exchange and ancillary agreements. Yeah, we should go to this gravel mic.
You want to might get your notes?
Well, that's all right. Yeah, I mean, I guess that'll be perfect, I think, so. Makes it easy. I'm gonna make this really simple and short. We have an exchange agreement. It's signed by the Park District on Orchard 2020. It is enforceable, and if certain conditions are met, there are remedies and recourses available to the district. Regarding ancillary agreements, supplemental agreements, master agreements, there are none that are signed. There were a series of documents that were exchanged after initially starting in March of 2021. Those agreements were sent back and forth, objected to, the source of a lot of acrimonious debate, discussion, and negotiation. Ultimately, this group, this board, never agreed to sign or pursue any specific supplemental agreement of any type. And as we sit here today, we have one agreement that's signed and enforceable, and that's the real property exchange agreement, which requires parties to exchange the two parcels that we're all familiar with. There's no additional cash consideration for that transaction. Certain contingencies were available to the parties in the first 240 days of that contract. Was it expired? Upon expiration, the ability to terminate the contract is terminated. So we have a binding enforceable contract for the exchange of the parcels. And it's, the board's decision to make those.
Just for the record, how many times have we asked, communicated with Orchard 2020 and any of the representatives to exchange fees? Close. How many times have we done that in the last?
I don't know that I can put a number on it, David, but I can tell you that it's
Every time.
scores of times or hundreds of times.
And the response has been, beat it.
The response has been, we're not doing that because we don't think we have to. But the truth is, they know what's in that. They know that it's binding and enforceable. They're banking on the fact that we're not going to pursue it.
Any other questions for Steve?
Yes, section 4A of the property exchange agreement, is it true that this is what Orchard 2020 is using as their excuse as to why they don't have to come to closing? I mean, the way I calculate
Yes.
it, we're in
Yeah,
our
that's correct.
6th contingency period. So
Well,
they-
there's only 2 contingency
I'm
periods.
teasing, I just,
Oh,
yeah, I'm
okay.
teasing.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so what?
You were
they-
right. I mean, I think it's about 6. That sounds
Okay,
about right.
yeah, I calculated it out today. So what they're saying is they don't have to come to closing because they have to have joint cooperation on applications inclusive of beach development and restoration applications. They have to have their permit in and they have to approve that permit. Is that correct? Is that what is holding this up?
That's how they represent to a
Thank
great
you.
Can I
extent.
clarify? I
Yes.
have to jump in because the initial demand of the 4A was citing reference to a request for an easement by the village of Winnetka. It was a 10-foot easement across the Sheridan Road frontage that got whittled down to 2 or 3 feet. It was only after the IDNR came back and suggested that we be joint applicants that they then threw that into the mix. There is never any discussion of linking the exchange agreement to the lakefront improvements. It was specifically excluded from the exchange agreement because the timing didn't make any sense. Both parties knew it was a 6 to 18-month process to secure a permit from the Army Corps and the IDNR. Thus, it was specifically excluded.
And may I ask a question, Mr. President? Why did you start informal joint negotiations on planning and design before you had a deed and knew whether this project would close? It appears that we have been working in a collaborative fashion. I don't oppose that ever. We have to get along with our neighbors. I know that. But why would you start that process before you had a deed? Because when you did that, we lost our leverage. And we have continued to lose leverage as, well, I'm not saying, that's just a question.
I know
Why?
I know it predated both yours and Cynthia's involvement on the board. We proceeded in good faith. And on March,
No question on that.
we proceeded in good faith, and we were faced with a series of requests that were extra contractual demands. That was followed with the master agreement that contained some extraordinarily outrageous extra contractual demands.
And repurpose the consideration in the exchange agreement.
That's right, and you guys can all read about it, it's all publicly available. And at that time, we engaged outside counsel to pursue litigation. I've explained this before, but for those who haven't heard it, we still have outside counsel engaged. We consulted with regarding the enforceability of the exchange agreement, and that remains an avenue for us to pursue. It was this board's decision on May 13th to proceed with a 10-day notice, leading to suit for specific performance. We walked right up to the line. Mr. Ishbia didn't, he blinked, and we both agreed that we should continue negotiations. It was this board's determination at that time that litigating with the billionaire was probably not the best use of our money. We might have revisited that. We might rethink that at this time, but we took what action we thought was best at the time, in the best interest of the community. And I will tell you personally that I also suggested, as I've seen many times, that business people entering into personal transactions treat it as a business transaction. And in the end, it's not the personal transaction. Mr. Ishbia came to us on June 16th, and he capitulated on his demand for the louvers. And he also told me privately, and he subsequently communicated in writing what his ultimate demands are. It's been whittled down, all that master agreement, gobbledygook, whittled down to a very simple easement agreement. And even that comes with an ultimatum for a design. And this board will discuss that request or demand of Mr. Ishbia momentarily. But we've been working in good faith, seeking to find a path forward to avoid litigation. Right or wrong, that's the path we chose. And we are here today listening to you and listening and addressing concerns of the community. And I think Mr. Ishbia's heard you as well. There's a lot of the most extraordinary demands that we taken off the table. So we're still trying to find a way through. And I just let anybody else that want to comment, go ahead.
Thank you. That's all I have.
There, for those of you who are not aware, Mr. Ishbia informed us recently, and you probably see right around the cranes, that Mr. Ishbia has purchased 195 Sheridan Road. That is the house immediately south of 203, which is adjacent to 205. He now holds title to consolidation of 195, 203, and 205, so that he can proceed with or without the exchange of property. He submitted to us at the on July 15th. He submitted to us a written narrative explanation of his request, along with a pictorial representation of the proposed plan and details of the plans, the planner pocket, and a copy of the easement, proposed easement agreement. That document was delivered to each of the board members. Would anyone like to comment on the submittal made by Mr. Ishbia?
We signed the original property agreement in October that we felt was relatively straightforward, but Mr. Ishbia made comments at a recent board meeting that he never would have signed it without having influence on the design of the breakwater. So it's not in the contract. To use Commissioner Root's, the four corners of the contract. I can't imagine why anyone on this board would ever sign another contract with Butcher 2020. My question is, because Mr. John comes with a problem, I would love to know what is in this most recently proposed contract that isn't apparent to Steve or any of our counsel that apparently is implied in some manner or form for the 2020. I think it's once a sucker, twice a fool, three times a moron. The only contract I ever want to sign for work in 2020 is the one that we have. that says we're supposed to treat exchange properly. That's it. No more contracts with someone who's proven to be a very challenging counterparty.
Anybody else want to comment?
Accolades to Commissioner Seaman, where's the deed? That's the question.
Yeah, where's the
Where is it? When is it coming? If it's not, we need to consider options and alternatives, like moving on.
I would just like to say that we've spent a lot of time going over demands that were in a master agreement that we never seriously considered. They were presented to us. We politely read them and politely set them aside. They've gathered an enormous amount of interest, but they're not of interest to us at all. It is informative to consider them as perhaps a negotiating strategy, or perhaps an extreme negotiating strategy. Be that as it may, I am much more interested in focusing on what works for citizens of Winnetka. What is the way forward that we can all agree on? And if it's all rock, great. Thank you, Costa, for working on those numbers. I look forward to seeing them. If it's rock and sheet pile, great. If it includes a planter pocket, great. If it doesn't, that's fine too. But I'd like to understand what gets us done, at least on half, at least on Elder. And then we can negotiate the rest of this. But I'd like to hear from our side. I've heard a lot of information from Mr. Ishbia's side. I think it's interesting that he keeps throwing forward proposals. I think it's informative for us to consider, but I'm much more interested in the collective opinions and preferences of Winnetkins that are constructive and forward.
My comments will be very simple. I would echo Christina, your summon, and David as well. Is for me, if there is even one encumbrance that would stop the property exchange, as far as I'm concerned, we don't sign it. Period. Done. 100% agree. We need to move on. We're going to get input from the community on the design. Take 2 steps back. It's the right thing to do with that beach, so we can figure out how we're going to do it. But I don't want to be tied to anyone that's going to come change a deal, do a different deal. I'm finished with that. That's my comment.
Just that, as far as I'm concerned, I share Mr. Archibald's opinion. I know in April, there were drafts that folks have seen that our council prepared, where we were prepared to consider a passive zone to give an additional 25 feet with conditions. And I'm so delighted to hear today that those are totally off the table. And it is my hope that we will never backtrack on that. I believe that that Orchard 2020 has dealt in very bad shape for a very long time. And it, again, Mickey, you said it all. It's time to move on. And that's my recommendation. We need to move on, close the file, and walk down a new path.
I'll briefly just comment. I think this has been a incredibly interesting process, and I really like to thank everybody for their participation. For my fellow commissioners, I know we talk about time. It doesn't matter, right? We're volunteers. Most of us have been coming here for twice a month for 5 years, right? And so we're not looking to do anything reckless or endanger our greatest resource. I find myself thinking about these beaches all the time. I'm talking to friends about it. I'm thinking about it regularly. I'm at church, I'm coaching a sport, in a golf ball. I'm thinking about the beachfront. Right? That is how all-consuming it's been. Whether I agree with your comments or not, it's great to get that civil engagement.
I think, personally, it's hurtful to be accused of not being ethical or not being honest or not representing the public, but I'll forgive you. I'm a big boy, I can take it. My goal is really simple, like my fellow commissioners, it's to create an incredible beach. I grew up in Lake Forest and remember in '87, their response to the beach, to lakefront issues was to build an incredible beach down up there. And as a youth, the helicopters were flying into the boulders. And what they built was incredible, and it's still there today. Go take a look at it. Through no fault of the leadership, the park district at the time, or those in Winnetka, Winnetka chose not to do anything, and they kicked the can. And here we are. So go take a look at Lake Forest. Now come back and check out Winnetka. Those beaches at Elder and Centennial, in my opinion, in comparison to Lloyd and other communities, are terrible. Elder's been closed, and Centennial, they're both vulnerable to being washed away. So let's save the bluffs, let's preserve the beaches for the future generations, and get to a point where the community can rally behind it. If you love Centennial, I get it. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I believe every beach should be permissible to bring a dog out of. All the beaches, not just one. If you love Elder, well, nobody loves Elder. It's been closed for 3 years, so let's get it open and get it back into our rotation. As for the property exchange, that will either come or it won't, and we'll move on. Thank you.
You have comments? Because I have a few things to say. Go ahead.
Sure. Gratified to hear that my fellow commissioners share the same concerns that I do for the most part. I'm glad that we had the chance to move forward constructively in partnership with our community with a greater focus on the themes that we've heard so far from the workshop in terms of use and access. And I just want to express appreciation again to the staff and my fellow board members for their time and effort to bring us to this point. And sometimes the best way forward is just backtrack a little bit to make sure you have it right. And heading full steam ahead. So thank you.
I hope you'll indulge me.
You got 3 minutes. I'm not getting many golf balls these days. I'm sleeping much. This is about all I think about.
So I have some specific goals to move forward with. Stay true to the Winnetka Waterfront 2030 plan, which was developed with input from multiple stakeholders of all ages and interests, formally adopted in 2016. The plan should be in keeping with the IDR guidelines and the coastal management program objectives. And we provided copies of those in the board packet for everyone, and they're also available online. There's a lot of great information contained in both those documents and very thoughtful and thorough consideration within the Lakefront Master Plan. It's long, read it. There's a lot to learn. Plan should be respectful of the public trust doctrine as interpreted by the state of Illinois. Winnetka Park District should be the sole permittee in any future permits built. Neighbors should be treated with respect and consideration, recognizing the same basket of rights as any other riparian owner along the Illinois shore of Lake Michigan. Dog beach users' interests should be accommodated, ideally with seasonal and year-round dog beaches, mindful that off-leash dogs must be prevented from running onto private property or adjacent public beaches. Finally, the Winnetka Park District should be proactive in addressing issues of trespass when beachgoers utilize public access points after hours to venture onto private property. Specific objectives. Well, the primary objective is to improve public access to people of all abilities. ADA access is planned at Centennial Park, which is unique among all 5 Winnetka beaches due to its length and mid-bluff access point, allowing an ADA accessible route from Sheridan Road all the way to the beach. Program uses of the beach should include non-motorized watercraft in Elder, swimming at Centennial, is formally approved in 2016 with the adoption of the Winnetka Waterfront 2030 plan and affirmed in August 2021. And I do want to note, I think it was said before, that the Waterfront 2030 plan includes phased implementation. We recognize that the priority is to stabilize the beachfront before proceeding with any additional land-based improvements. The exchange agreement, we've gone over that in the master agreement. I don't want to belabor it. There was only one signed agreement. That's it, nothing else. Anything else you read, no, it was all a lengthy, protracted negotiation. This time is also a factor. Time to reconsider their positions. Time, Mr. Ishbia made good on one of his promises. He was just gonna go buy Neil Bureau's house at 195, and he did. That gives him the opportunity to move forward without us, and us time to do what we need to do, develop the plan. And if he so chooses to proceed with the exchange agreement, so be it, but we'll do it on our terms. Public trust doctrine, the Illinois Coastal Management Program, the IDNR guidelines. For those of you who attempted to understand the public trust doctrine as interpreted by the state of Illinois, you'll no doubt acknowledge it's muddled. Illinois is by far less protected of the public versus private interests regarding access to and along the Lake Michigan shoreline, much less protected than either Michigan or Wisconsin. Having attempted to discern clear direction for months, I now have a far greater appreciation for Charlie Shabika's urging many months ago, why don't you go ahead and sue the IDNR and Army Corps in an effort to bring more clarity in the law. Ted, Chuck, I think you would agree, it's muddled. That said, that's not the role of the Park District, and we're not doing that. Included in the packet this evening is the IDNR Coastal Management Program and the Shore Protection Guidelines. It's a lot to digest. Interpretation's muddled. But page 55 provides the distinction between public and private beaches as decided by the Illinois Supreme Court in the 10 referenced earlier, Rutledge v. Knox, 1917. With respect to the Elder Centennial matter, I hope we'll not lose sight of the forest and trees. Winnetka Waterfront 2030 plan was thoughtfully prepared in an effort to provide greater access to Lake Michigan for the benefit of all. When it was adopted in 2016, it includes specific guidance with respect to Elder and Centennial parks as depicted in the plans both with and without the acquisition of 261. The Winnetka Park District is in the implementation phase of the 2030 plan, and it now is facing substantial challenges to the previously agreed upon course of action. Thoughtful arguments have been presented regarding the legality and the efficacy of the planner pockets, especially including the importance of addressing access and lakefront views. That said, we must acknowledge that the character of Lake Michigan shoreline along the North Shore has been irreversibly changed by the man-made improvements constructed on the lakebed over the past 100+ years. The beaches along the North Shore are sand-starved. Consequently, riparian owners implemented headland beach systems as described in the State of Illinois Coastal Management Program 2011, that's on page 49. The Winnetka Waterfront 2030 plan thoughtfully envisions Lloyd, and Centennial, and Elder with headland beach systems, while Maple and Tower remain as is. The balance was intentional, and as is the intended uses of each of the lakefront parks. What I perceive now is various factions seeking to alter the primary objectives of the Winnetka Waterfront 2030 plan and the Illinois Coastal Management Plan of improving public access and recreational opportunities along Lake Michigan. Chuck, or excuse me, I think Ted said it. These beaches do not belong exclusively to us. They belong to the people of the state of Illinois. We're the guardians. We are improving these beaches. We have been allowed over time to charge beach access because of the money that we put into improving. But yes, we have an obligation to welcome everyone. There's a difference in price for a tax-paying citizen when I get not, but we are very clearly bound to provide access to all. I've been disappointed in some of the actions of the dog beach folks. We've worked hard to accommodate dog beaches, or the dog beach user needs. Centennial Beach has been fenced, gated, and locked away from the general public for the past 27 years for the exclusive use of the 200 to 300 dog beach pass holders. Winnetka has 5 beaches totaling approximately 2,275 feet shoreline. The Centennial Dog Beach comprises 21% of the total public beachfront in Winnetka. By virtue of its topography and bluff length, Centennial Park and Beach is the sole location of all 5 Winnetka beaches that affords ADA access from Sheridan Road. While I sympathize with the dog beach users, alternatives are in the works for dogs, and ADA access should be a priority. There's another faction that appears to oppose the plan, concerned that it will attract additional beachgoers to the area. As I said earlier, it's anathema to the stated objectives of the Winnetka Waterfront 2030 Plan and the Illinois Coastal Management Plan. We got grants to prepare this plan. We're duty bound to provide access to all residents, inside or outside Winnetka, and those voices should be heard. And finally, there are those who object to a billionaire pursuing self-interest at the perceived expense of the general public. And I think that's a sentiment shared by all of us. I acknowledge that changes need to be made to address several legitimate concerns regarding views and access, but I remain steadfast in my support for the vision embodied in the Winnetka Waterfront 2030 Plan, including the unification of Elder and Centennial parks and beaches. That's what I'd say. So.
May I comment, Mr. President?
Yes, please.
I had hoped tonight that we would be here in a healing, bringing together, trying to unite. And I have to take great offense to you singling out a single user group, the Dog Beach people, because the folks that have been signing the petition against the Ishpia plan are not Dog Beach people. They are people of all user groups. They kayak. I mean, here's Mary Garrison. She does it all. I mean, I'm looking around the room here. There's Phil Enquist. These are not just Dog Beach people. Here's Susie Schreiber. My gosh, she's done so many things in the park for so many years. It is not a healing and a unification fashion to single out a single user group. And I would ask that you withdraw those comments right now, and that we try to move forward in an incremental fashion to start to implement the 2030 plan for all user groups and for all, candidly, residents of Illinois. I'm very disappointed by you singling out that group. It's just one of many that we're very, and continue to be very upset.
I'll say this regarding the dog user groups. I own a dog beach pass. I've got 2 dogs. I love dogs. And we're accommodating dogs off-season on Elder and Centennial. That has been discussed many times. We intend to allow dogs on the beach between mid-September and mid-May. We also formed a dog beach committee that is seeking, with the village's consent, to establish a year-round dog beach on a portion of Tower, should this plan for Elder and Centennial go through. We also work with the village as far back as this plan to find a location for an off-leash dog park, which the village identified on the top of the old municipal yard. Now with the stormwater project moving forward, we will be able to proceed with that upon completion of stormwater. So we're in fact looking at least 3. And as someone mentioned earlier, there's still the opportunity to preserve a portion of Centennial Beach. In the event that the exchange does not go forward, there's the possibility of retaining a portion of that for dog beach use. So I am simply intent to identify that there's only one beach that affords real ADA access because of the topography, and that's intended. You can get, on this plan, you can wheel yourself in a wheelchair from Sheridan to the beach. That was what this plan was held up by John Thomas for ADA access, and it's an important part. So let's not lose that. I also did want to comment that we are planning on another workshop session. I think this board have we coalesced on August 4th, or are we going to put that out for further discussion?
Email was sent to the commissioners. There's no final date set, but I'll track emails that it has.
Yeah. The intent is to continue with the workshop session. We took we immediately posted myself, Rika, took the comments that we received from the first workshop session, and POSTA is developing a variety of options to be responsive to those, so that we can evaluate several different options that address the concerns.
One, I would strongly suggest no 2 meeting weeks.
Oh,
thank you. No,
Here, here.
Like, no more, that is one. 2, I would hope that the board, without violating Open Meetings Act, that we each get to look at the plan that is presented to the public. I know in some hasty manner, you and Costa and others put together the plan. I kind of saw it, but we didn't really have input on.
Yeah, that was just a prompt discussion.
Right.
That was it. It said for discussion purposes. only.
Right, no,
Not
I
the
get it.
plan. That was for discussions, prompt discussion. Now that we've had a discussion, there are other more specific alternatives that goes to this.
So I would just ask that Costa, John, send it to each of the board members for their some.
We'd like to get those plans published well ahead of time as part of the board package, so people can come to a workshop session with some ideas.
We have at least one commissioner that is not going to be here on the 4th. And usually the first 2 weeks of August, I've come to learn here, tend to be dead zones. So I'm wondering if perhaps we might be able to consider moving this out to the 3rd week of August.
I think that's our ordinary board meeting is on the 18th.
Is it back to school week then?
When is that?
But the workshop isn't a voting meeting.
I know,
Generally
but
speaking.
it's good to have all our commissioners here.
It's true, but we have 4 days that we're circulating, so we should.
All right, well, let's continue this discussion via email, and we will post notice of when the workshop session will be up. Right. Moving on. Stormwater construction and golf course improvements. Costa?
Warren, thank you. As distributed in the board packet, we are, or I should say, we, as part of the village's team and part of the stormwater project, we are, or the village has broken ground, as many probably have seen at the corner of Willow and Bitter. Our due diligence and our duty to be moving this forward, our project on, is the development and ultimately the decision on how to proceed with our request for alternatives as it relates to the stormwater project. This has been distributed to the park board previously. I've had an opportunity to sit down with most of you, and I know Nick gave a lead, had an opportunity to sit down with the rest of you as it relates to the park district's request, or the staff's request to move forward with some of the alternatives that were identified as part of the bid alternates for the stormwater work. There is no formal proposal in front of you tonight to adopt to. What we wanted to make sure is that we understood as we move to continue with this process, there's a couple channels that we wanted to discuss. And I know Warren has had the opportunity to have some discussions with Chris Ritz with some opportunities that would afford the park district to move forward in a couple different capacities. I think it's most appropriate for me then to transition back to you, Warren, to go ahead and discuss those opportunities with the rest of the park board, so we can ultimately come to a decision, maybe in August or shortly before the work would construct or start on the golf course, the main golf course, related to our improvements in November, not this year.
My recommendation is that Nikki and I schedule a meeting with Chris and Amy, who we negotiated the original agreement with, take you and your recommendations as your interpretation of the agreement and how the cost sharing, and then we can hammer it out with them and then come back to the board with some further information, further consideration.
Do you want approval for a scope that includes the alternatives we were discussing?
Two separate things. One is the cost allocation that was determined by the village engineer, and the other is the alternates. And then the final consideration is financing of those alternates through the village.
Correct.
That is something that I've previously discussed with Chris, given their financing in place for these improvements and our financial burden during having no revenue during the closure of the course, that we arrange to work through the village's financing, so we pay for those extras over a period of time.
Could add a comment to it. Again, we pretty much have socialized all of what the alternates are. And the benefit to come with the cost of doing that. So, yeah, I think that's something that you're decision on the alternates. It should be a long discussion.
What's the largest alternate?
Large, yeah, so largest alternate right now would be the actual cart path installation. That's broken down into several components, but the biggest portion of that component is $681,000 change.
Total number of the cart paths?
Total cart paths is about $1 million. Total request would be about, from the park district staff, based on the engineering or recommendation from the village, is $1,214,952.88 for the ultimate.
Biggest chunk of that's cart paths,
Which is
cart
nearly $1 million.
paths generate more revenue, fewer closures, so there's a dynamic
The
relationship.
return on investment is less than 7 years from payment.
Right. So Mickey, we'll take that up with Amy and Chris and come back. Do we have other comments or questions for Costa?
I'm just gonna keep saying.
Thank you.
Golf course management. May I have a motion to approve the engagement of Kemper Sports as golf course management partner as recommended by its staff? So moved. Second. Discussion, please.
President James, requested by the Park District Board of Commissioners, 3 golf course management firms for contact for construction management and post-construction partnership. Kemper Sports, Troon, and Golf Visions. Kemper Sports and Troon advanced comprehensive responses to the opportunity, while Golf Visions opted not to participate. Through the course of discussions with Troon and with Kemper Sports, I do need to acknowledge Commissioner Cotto, Commissioner Seaman, Commissioner Archambault, Commissioner James, and Costa Catulas for significant time and effort invested in the overall process. Through that process, we've identified Kemper Sports as the partner with which to engage with a target date for engagement as soon as possible, but notably August 1st. That would afford Kemper Sports the opportunity to meet our staff, begin to improve the course as we know it before it goes into construction. That means the 18-hole course. The 9-hole course already is closed through the construction process. So first half is for the board to consider Kemper Sports as recommended partner. And then there's a second piece of the puzzle subject to the board's approval of Kemper Sports. I'll let some discussion of that.
Public's knowledge, both firms, Kemper and Troon, were, their references were all reference checks. They both came through my endorsement to the people that do work. So we certainly would not go wrong with using either of those firms. And one of the other things we had talked about in early discussions with Truman and Kemper was, what happens if our staff up and leaves one day? What happens? What can you do for us? And both of them said, we can parachute in and be ready to go in 3 days. Subsequent to those comments from both of those firms, the general superintendent of the golf course resigned. So they're short-staffed, they've been short-staffed. The quality of the golf course has continued to go down and down and down. So for me, the benefits of both construction management, of being our advocate, our watchdog, our partner with how these renovations get done on the golf course. Both firms are expert at it. They know what they're supposed to do. They know what it's supposed to be. And in case anyone would say, well, geez, why isn't the architect doing that? That's not really the scope. The scope is we want to make sure it's done the way it's supposed to be done. And in case anyone would guess, this is in partnership with the village. And the village has got other things to do with stormwater. So we have to have someone who's, I believe, third party that can be impartial and make sure that both parties, both the village and the park district, are doing what they're supposed to be doing on this thing. So that's for the construction management of it. They got the expertise for it. It makes all the sense in the world. And from a pure management perspective, the quality of the golf courses that both firms manage is exceptional. And given we're doing this renovation on the golf course, I would say it's once in a lifetime, but it's been 107 years. It's time to, so I will say this, it is time to do it right. So I strongly, strongly endorse giving this award to Kemper Sports and having them come on board immediately.
I'll just make one comment. Colleen and Cynthia pushed us to look at some of this. We didn't end up selecting them at this juncture, but you know what, we learned a lot. I think the process that Director Peterson, Commissioner Kodo, myself, Costa, great process, and obviously Mickey doing some checks of his own on it. It's the way it's supposed to be. And this sheet right here, man, this is a great sheet for every commissioner to look at. The decision that I think we came to is that Kemper just has had success at golf courses that are very similar to what we want to have for a golf course. And, you know, hopefully we can be able to sit down with them and come to terms that are favorable to the parties.
They're not
They're not urgent.
I just wanted to say thank you to Executive Director Peterson, Commissioner Kodo, Commissioner Stephen, and Costa Catulas for going through the process to really understand these, because I know that it did require some time and learning, and I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of other members of the board, but also really on behalf of the community, because I do agree with David that it was a good process and we have learned a lot. And also Mickey for doing the reference checks, because that also gave us some insight that we didn't have. So thank you.
I learned a great deal in the write-up. So Commissioner Cotto, Commissioner Seaman, I wish I could have been on a field trip with Commissioner Archibald. I probably would have learned something there too. But again, thank you so much. And thanks for following the process. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please. What? Do we have a motion?
Mickey, Commissioner Archibald made the motion.
I did motion. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
There's a motion and a second.
Okay, let's go.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Seaman,
Yes.
Commissioner Kodo,
Yes.
Commissioner Archambault,
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson,
Yes.
Commissioner Rapp,
Yes.
Commissioner Root,
Yes.
Commissioner James? Yes. Motion carries. May I have a motion to allow Commissioner Kodo and Seaman, Commissioners Kodo and Seaman, to finalize the financial terms of the agreement with Kemper Sports, so the sports management. So moved. Motion in second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Koto,
Yes.
Commissioner Archambault,
Yes.
Commissioner Lesson,
Yes.
Commissioner Rapp,
Yes.
Commissioner Root,
Yes.
Commissioner Seaman,
Yes.
Commissioner James.
Yes. Motion carries. Moving on to proposed sale of Library Park to the Winnetka Northfield Public Library District. Mr. Peterson.
So Commissioner Koto and Commissioner Seaman and I have gotten to know each other quite a bit. We continue to work on different projects. Library Park is a process where we communicated with the Board of Trustees for the Winnetka Northfield Public Library District. They have an intent to purchase Library Park from the Park District. We have an intent to sell the park to the library. It requires 3 appraisals. We have 2 appraisals that have been secured. We then asked the library to ask their appraiser if they would identify a 3rd appraisal firm. We also asked our appraiser to identify a 3rd appraisal firm, and then asked each of the existing appraisers to decide on the 3rd appraiser, so that we did not have any conflict of interest in the identified 3rd appraiser. That individual is Eric Dost. Mr. Seaman and our Commissioner Seaman and I had a chance to talk with Eric, and we are comfortable with his process and his price. We are expecting a 3rd appraisal to be presented to the library and to the Park District within 3 weeks, if not sooner. Not yet. Based on the 3rd appraisal, we'll move forward in discussions with the library regarding the transaction.
Should we move that discussion about, because the library is also represented by that fine firm, Robin Schwartz. Mr. Adams reports for it. I believe tonight's discussion, there should be a motion made to engage in this.
Ask Mr. Adams, you received a conflict of interest because you represent both parties?
Well, I mean, we've done transactions when we were representing both sides with a waiver, when there's agreed terms, but, you know, it's obviously the client's decision. And if you're more comfortable going outside for that, I have no problem with support that. One thing I did want to mention is when you do vote for this transaction, it's a 3/4 vote, which requires 6.
So with that, I guess, do you want me to make up a motion? Motion to engage, I guess, legal counsel solely for legal counsel, not including Robin Schwartz, solely for contract negotiations on the sale of Library Park.
Second.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I know we have looked at several firms. Do you have a recommendation? I know Commissioner Koto and Commissioner Seaman that had done some work on that. Are you ready to discuss that tonight?
Yes, I'm ready to discuss it.
Great.
Yeah. Do you want me to open it?
I guess. Yeah, to me, a recommendation of the firm, yeah, is fine.
I would recommend. I spoke to 2 separate firms. I interviewed them over the course of the weekend prior. I summarized my comments and sent them around to all of the commissioners 1 by 1. And my recommendation would be that we retain
Good mom.
I know. You're early too. Adam Simon and Ansel. I asked them questions about, first I asked about conflicts. Second, I asked about the scope of the transaction. It's a small transaction. Third, given the timing that we were originally considering, I asked could they fit this into their conversation, into their workflow, and what their resources were, both in the real estate capacity and the park district, general practice area. So each of them is priced roughly the same. I included that information, and both of them felt that the transaction was quite straightforward. There was some difference of opinion. We felt we needed to have reappraisals. They all felt that the Government Property Transfer Act was more applicable. We only needed two. That said, we're getting a third transaction, a third appraisal. And we're very, very close. I mean, we're within 5% on either side. So I expect that we'll be able to transact fairly quickly. There are a couple of considerations, a couple of restrictions on use of funds, and I guess we'll document those, and a couple of conversations regarding some additional benefits that the library, because their district is Winnetka Northfield, and ours has some areas of Northfield, some areas of outside of the boundaries. How would we make the Northfield residents happy that those funds, which are their taxes, values, or seats, are being used to purchase? So we have some two pieces of the equation that we can negotiate a little bit further. But we're very, very close, and I'm confident we'll get it done.
Mr. President, I just want to let you know that I know Adam Simon. I know that firm with very good lawyers. It's good choice.
Thank you. We get another word?
We do.
So is there, you want to distill that to a motion?
Yeah, sure. I move that we engage Ansel Link, specifically Adam Simon, to represent us in the library part. So,
Motion, Commissioner Stevens, second by you. We'll go right to roll call.
Commissioner Shambo,
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson,
Yes.
Commissioner Rapp,
Yes.
Commissioner Root,
yes.
Commissioner Seaman, Commissioner Koto,
Yes.
Commissioner James.
Yes. Just want to clarify, no reflection in the.
No.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, moving on, Winnetka Platform Tennis Club Construction Agreement. May I have a motion to approve the Winnetka Park District Winnetka Platform Tennis Club Construction Agreement as presented? So moved. Motion and a second, discussion.
Thank you, President James. Your packet has a memo regarding the long process with the Winnetka Platform Tennis Club regarding their interest to install 2 additional platform tennis courts. Their club is vibrant without question. So the opportunity to install 2 platform tennis courts has been on their radar screen much more than it's been on the Park District's radar screen. So their want has it now advanced to the point where they have 2 platform tennis courts that they have secured that they will donate to the Winnetka Park District, as well as funds to install the platform tennis courts. They have provided financial documents to Commissioner Seaman and Commissioner James to assure the Park District that there are funds to support the construction of these platform tennis courts. They continue to seek donations, so the document that's in your packet is in many ways fluid. So donations have actually increased recently, the last 5 days by another $1,600. We're working through final pieces of the budget itself, collaborating with Costa as materials change in cost. But generally speaking, you have a complete construction agreement in front of you. I do want to thank Paul Schwartz for his time and efforts with this. Certainly, without question, Costa Catullus and Rick Schramm with help. And I know he's not here, but President Colin Cross, who runs the Winnetka Platform Tennis Club, has been remarkable in his partnership, if you will, and negotiations with Park District. So certainly respectful of any questions or additional information required by the commissioners, but certainly thank you for your consideration of the construction. Coach, anything else to add?
Not at this time.
Now it's questions from the board. Good deal, they stepped up, they come up with plans, they're not smart like staff. So this, so staff is equally done the same. It's a good deal, we get to it. It's a lot.
The porch project we used tonight, formal season kicks off in December. When do you think installation?
The target time is by the end of August. We have two easements that we're working through, one with Crown Castle, cell tower owner, if you will, and one with Vertical Bridge. They're the other cell tower entity. The Vertical Bridge discussions are waiting for signature. The Crown Castle negotiations are still in process, but we are probably 90% of the way complete with Crown Castle. You raised your hand.
I would just like to add that with construction, we still have to go through the building permit process with the village of Winnetka. I've had an opportunity to meet with the village forester on a couple of key issues, as well as their engineering staff and assistant director of community development, Brian Dorcas. We're hopeful that we can get done by September 1, but honestly, it might drag into September.
Sounds pretty aggressive.
So I just want to be upfront and honest and fully transparent here. So we're going to do our best.
The other thing too, that in my conversation with Costa, just from a voucher standpoint, because the money's being donated, he's not gonna come to us and say, hey, $150,000 cost, we're not paying for it, because the paddle club is, the money's coming in and the money's going out. So
Correct.
there's not gonna be the normal voucher approval, because it's not our money.
Well, I'm not sure if I agree with that. It's a donation to the park district, so it is our money when it's donated. So I still think it should go through the normal channels.
Should?
Yeah. Yeah.
I scratched the donation policy discussion, but there are references to some type of, approval and identification of these donations. So I just want to make sure that
Yeah,
we're all,
I think it's probably important to them that they're making a donation.
that we accept the donation as in line with the project that we scope the design and approved.
So the donation will be appropriately restricted. The content of the construction agreement has been vetted by counsel, Robin Schwartz, to ensure that that process of donating the courts and the funds to then construct are dotting every I and crossing every T.
We don't want waivers, and we're gonna, and we've already, within the agreement, take title to the courts. Our courts, so we absolutely follow that process.
In regards to the normal method that we would go out for an open bid over items of 25,000 and have, 10 days on the street and come back with a board recommendation. The contract was already struck and agreed upon for the courts themselves. There's nothing in my power that I can use beyond that, so the board needs to understand that that price of fee for the courts has already been negotiated and will be completed for the contract.
And then we'll be paid by the foundation.
I presume that's a condition of the donation.
It is.
Yes, a condition of the donation.
Yeah, but just be aware of the agreement. So, there's ancillary costs in regards to excavation, the paving that goes around the court, the landscaping that's going to ensue afterwards, the mechanical engineering to complete the electrical subpanel that needs to be installed for this process, as well as the additional gas pipes to support the 2 million feet of heat in the courts. Those are ancillary costs that should be under the $25,000 threshold. But once again, trying to, now that we're looking to have an agreed upon commitment here, I can fully vet these out in their entirety now, but we're under the line. So just be aware, I won't have time to come back to the park board on August 18th, but we're trying to get this done by September 1.
Understood. I can still report out status.
All right. There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Commissioner Lawson,
Yes.
Commissioner Rapp,
Yes.
Commissioner Root,
Yes.
Commissioner Seaman,
Yes.
Commissioner Koto,
Yes.
Commissioner Shambo,
Yes.
Commissioner James.
Yes. Motion carries. Down tab. Moving on to Crow Island Woods, a request from D36 for conveyance of property. So Cynthia Rapp and I met with D36 President Emily Rose. And we had previously been presented by D36 with a request to consider a property transfer in connection with the proposed Crow Island improvements. Those of you who are keeping track, D36 is a referendum on I believe it's on the November ballot. If that referendum passes, they will be making certain improvements, which may include a 5,000 square foot gymnasium, which could be very useful to the park district. We also noted in the presentation of the plat of survey that D36 first grade playground already encroaches upon the park district property, known as the Crow Island Woods. So we have asked D36 to do a title search and produce a more thorough plat survey so we can identify whether or not there are any existing agreements that govern the use of park district property. In the event of the D36 proceeding with construction of the addition of the school on park district property, it would be my recommendation that we entertain a conveyance of title of the property. Because that obviously will never come back to the park district of the school. If it does not, then we should, well, if it does, we should also at the same time clean up the first grade playground issue. If it doesn't, if the referendum doesn't pass, and we still need to clean up the first grade playground issue. So, Cynthia, do you have anything else to add?
Not at this time. I do have other questions, but
Yeah, just so everybody understands, I forgot to add that there's been joint use agreements between D36 and the Park District. We use their facilities and vice versa. We are looking to, with the spirit of intergovernmental cooperation, land on an agreement where dollars are exchanged, but we get use in perpetuity of their facilities according to their schedule. That's something that needs to be negotiated. We can't do it until D36 passes referendum, decides what they're gonna build.
Yeah.
They have to come to us and say, okay, we passed the referendum, now we can proceed with either 3,600 square foot gym or 5,000 square foot gym, which may or may not encroach upon our property.
You just keep us up to date.
Yep, that's it. All right. G, inclusion of Winnetka Park District documents on public website.
this is a fine item.
You want to pull the mic?
This is an item that I put on the agenda in an effort to be responsive to some of the public comments that we talked about last time. And so I have had some discussion with John about it. And I would like to make a motion to put our policy manual on our website first. And then John's feedback had been to consider in more detail what other documents we could include on our website in an effort to be more transparent to the public. And, examples of things might be, past ordinances or, other project-specific information as we see that that's appropriate. So that is not a short-term thing, but I actually think that we can do in the short term is add our policy manual to our website. So should I just go ahead and make a motion and then we can discuss it? I moved to have the current Winnetka Park District Policy Manual that was approved in 2019 added to the website with immediate effect within the Board of Commissioners section at the end of the first paragraph, beginning with the board's primary function is to establish policy, and then add a sentence to that paragraph that says the current Winnetka Park District Policy Manual is available here with a link to the document that was already approved. I would note that the current policy manual sections do appear in a marked up format in the February 24th and March 10th agenda packets. So I've made my motion. Do I have a second?
Seconded. Sorry. So second.
Any further discussion?
I think the only,
Wait,
point of order. Point of order.
I believe Cynthia made the motion.
Yes.
Yes.
And so.
You said so moved. Colleen second. So
Cynthia.
Cynthia Colleen. So make sure you go.
Discussion from the board.
I would just say, I don't know why you wouldn't want to have it up there. But I'm an idiot, but I don't know. It's in the packet. It's already in the public domain. Why would we not want to have it on our website as, again, as Cynthia said, transparency. I think it's a great idea. Simple way to read it.
We spent a lot of time working on it. It's fascinating.
Not only that, but I did just a cursory review of surrounding park districts, and they all have their manual on the website. So I would encourage, I think it's a great idea.
Also, I just want to report back to the board that at the meeting of the 16th, I offered to provide some a list of additional items to consider putting on the website. Provided that to JP since that meeting, and I know he's processed, because he doesn't have anything else to do, he's going to get on that right away. So I'm sure he'll be getting to that fairly soon, and we're going to get some of those things that are statutorily required to make sure they're on.
Yeah, so we've already begun that process, Steve. I think the one thing I just want to point out, it is the 2019 policy manual, so we'll make sure that that's duly noted, and we'll get it up in as quickly as possible, recognizing that there are other things going on. For instance, tomorrow, Molly Crowley, who's been working so hard with Gracie Durham and the business unit leaders, I think they're going to release our digital program for the fall programming. So that has consumed a significant amount of time, and we'll do so again tomorrow. So when we get this policy manual up, will be next week at some point. But so the immediacy of the posting might be in the week.
There's a motion and a second. Roll call.
Commissioner Rack?
Yes.
Commissioner Root?
Yes.
Commissioner Seaman?
Yes.
Commissioner Archambault?
Yes.
Commissioner Lusson?
Yes.
Commissioner James?
Yes.
So I just to follow up on John's suggestion, I would be happy to work with you on that. The inclusion of other information. If there's another commissioner who's interested in doing that, I think that would be fantastic. People are burned out. I'm happy to
Caroline. is-
soldier on. Okay. So we will pick that up in the fall. What does that sound? Does that sound-
You want to,
Once we get the library part
Okay.
done, and once we get golf management done, I will reluctantly.
We'll be delighted to have a first pass and to put to you as a review before we go to the whole board. Okay, excellent. Thank you.
I'll do a second.
Okay, good. I love how people just roll up their sleeves and jump in when they excited stuff.
All right. You good with G? Good with item G? All right, move on. Move on to new business. Review and discussion of policy for donations.
That I tabled.
Oh, your table that?
Yeah.
Discussion of board review and approval process for design and construction projects over 250,000.
Yes, I had wanted to tee this up for some input from the board, just based on some of the comments that we've had on our recent project, to give a little bit more thought, so that when we go through this process again, that we've kind of established a few checkpoints, so that we're kind of all pulling in the same direction and have a project going to permit or project going out to donations that the board has endorsed, more fully. I mean, things may not be perfect, but I think that we need to make sure that we have that buy-in of the community and of the board members, so that we are, to use David's term from an earlier time, locking arms a little bit more tightly. So I had circulated to board members some documentation of what I thought was kind of a good example from a process standpoint. We'll see how the project turns out, but I think Highland Park District has an excellent workflow on their website of how they kind of go through the project approval process. So it includes things like, the discussion of options, the options are costed, the board votes on it, a couple options to pursue. Then, I mean, it's not, rocket science. They had a working group. I know that there's been a desire to have more broad feedback for this project, because we are getting such great feedback from the community. But, having the process to gather that input was important. There was definitely a vote on the design prior to the permit submission and official fundraising. And then we had talked about previously, the early release of the bid document, so that we can secure a wider range of interests, which I thought was also a positive. So, and it was also just nice because there were dates of all the key decisions, and then when you look at the agenda packets and the minutes, they correspond, and that is really, I think, helpful in terms of improving transparency and buy-in from the public. So I don't know if anyone else had a chance to look at that, or if people have some other thoughts on what some appropriate checkpoints are for us as we kind of, go through this process again. But I definitely wanted to tee up some discussion in open session, with staff input here as well, so that we can hopefully work a little bit more effectively together as we go forward.
So I just have a few questions, because I read through that. In the finance committee, we did put in place some policies regarding cumulative expenditures that total $250,000, I think it's $250,000 for one particular vendor over a certain time period. And so I think it was a 2-year or 3-year time period. And we wanted to see payments and progress percentages reported in the way that we currently do with, I think, Costa and Jim Crocker generally present those when we do capital projects. So that was one thing that is included in the, from the finance committee section. The second thing I would say is Highland Park is a bigger community. And I know that this process, you and I talked about this, came about as a function of their difficulty with their reach. So my question is, so my question is, what's the vote lunch? So how do you think it maps to a smaller community? Because we have identified roughly 900 citizens who voted for many of the recent round of commissioners and who have signed petitions, who are Winnetka residents. That's about 900 people that conceivably could be interested. Do the numbers make sense? Do we have enough people? Do we have enough bodies to make it lean? Or can we streamline their process because we're a little small?
I definitely feel like we could streamline, but I really like that everything was like transparent and linked. So I would not, I mean, they have mountains of other planning documents that I think that we would struggle, that they then draw on to develop their plans, that I think we might struggle. And I don't know that we can get to the level of presentation, but I do feel like there's an opportunity for improvement on the checkpoints and then also calling out, the timeline. It's very, I felt like it was very powerful, like we engaged people on this stage, and we got this input, and then the board made a decision. So I feel like we're, doing some of those steps, but I think also there's value in calling that out, which I don't feel like is a huge investment. And I think that one of our challenges candidly is, the board turns over. The board turns over at a very predictable rate with the election cycle, and having the resources so that people can't get up to speed, both the public and board members and your staff members is positive. I feel like
Creating
it's like
a
a
little bit of
block.
institutional memory.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, their materials, they're really good.
Well, they have, I mean, there's.
They have more staff.
They have a lot more staff.
Yeah.
Are you suggesting we could change the policy manual, or are you suggesting a motion or introduction of procedure? I can't even remember what it was.
If I could just make a quick comment. So being a smaller agency in a smaller park district, with our, $12 million budgeting, Highland Park literally has their own in-house park planners. That's all they do, full time. And they've been there for years. I think Rick's been up there for, I want to say 27 years. And to have that ability to engage in that process, to master plan in-house and to keep up with the complexities and everything else, that's easy when you have a department kind of focused on that. When you start broadening that out to the perspective that we do, a lot of times that's done for the larger projects with a third party, i.e. the Winnetka Waterfront 2030 plan, how clear and how distinct that was. That was something that was sourced out third party through the Lakota group as we vetted that process out with going through finding out the most, or going through that process and vetting out the proper party to engage that process through the board, through the RFP process, request for proposals, and then identifying, distilling that down, and then ultimately approving it. And you can see the amount of time that was spent, the complexity, the clarity, driving to where we're at today. It works fabulous, but it comes at a higher cost. When we start looking at these smaller projects, not that Elder Centennial is a small project by any means, but we focus back in, say, like on a project like Lloyd, we met all the due diligence, we found the master plan outline, and I think we did a fairly good job keeping the community abreast of what was going on, keeping people focused and understanding the timeline, the sequencing, and everything else. Certain things have changed dynamically, and we do our best as a park, as staff and the park board and for the community, of course, because that's who we support the most. But I'm sure you heard my name, you guys know how many projects I work on constantly. And for me to be able to drive down to those items with the support staff that we have is very hard. So we're going to be looking at either support staff to help implement something like this, or we would actually look to third party to help us on the larger projects, and that would be part of the soft costs that go along with that. So when we come back for, say, Elder Centennial, if we look to a new vendor, as far as a new designer, what have you, depending on what route we choose to move forward with, those costs we can incur, but they're going to be incurred as soft costs up front, driving project costs, which we're always trying to drive down. So just a few things to be aware of as we go down this road. I just want to make sure that, Cynthia, yourself, plus others understand the complexity of this. Sometimes it's easy in principle, but it's hard to, not always as easy to implement. Sometimes it's a lot harder.
Okay, so what I observed looking at the Highland Park boat launch project as an example is that the engineering firm actually did a lot of hands-on discussion of the options with the costs. But then I think was, presented to the board. It felt like looking at at least at the minutes of the Lloyd project, that definitely happened. I think to a greater degree than it happened in the last project. So I just want to make sure that we have some checkpoint that the Elder Centennial project. Well, I got controversial Lloyd project.
I would just say Lloyd was all us. So that's a really makes it an easier lift.
Yeah.
And this one is us with a private entity and a confidentiality clause.
Mm-hmm.
And some negotiating capital that you don't want to squander until you've reached something. And then you have lots of opportunities to opine, to refine.
It's the soft cost that drive me bonkers. I think what you're trying to get at
I think there's value in continuing this discussion. There's, I mean, Costa, I haven't had the opportunity to read through all that stuff that you submitted.
Okay,
So
yeah, no,
I'd love to-
I just
I'd love
wanted
to do
to,
it there. I know there's people that are waiting here for a second public comment, I would assume. So I just want to say, yes, let's continue. the
Yeah, let's
discussion.
continue the discussion and just make sure that we have, before we make significant more investments, that we are all on board to the greatest extent possible, so that we are not making investments that then we can't use or.
Okay, no, thank you.
Next item is a resolution 22-7-21, appointing new authorized IMRF agent. May I have a motion to approve resolution number 22-7-21, appointing new authorized IMRF agent? So moved. Second. Any discussion?
You want to take it?
Thank you. As many of you may know, Brittany Purnell, a former Human Resources Director, was the former authorized agent. She left on June 9th. We did not have time to draft a resolution and present this to the board at the June meeting. But there are transactions that our employees need for their retirement well-being. So we felt it was best to introduce this to you now, so that somebody can actually conducts the business of our employees on its behalf. As you do not have a current human resources manager, superintendent of finance, and this deals with finances, seem to be most appropriate to appoint you to this position. IMRF requires this under the Illinois Pension Code on 40 ILCS 5/7-135 So we are required by law to have somebody as an authorized agent. So let's take that responsibility.
Any questions, Mr. Crocker? There is, so they have a motion to approve resolution 22-7-21, appointing new authorized IMRF agent. Thanks, Crocker. So moved. Second. Yeah. All right, roll call.
Commissioner Root,
Yes.
Commissioner Seaman,
Yes.
Commissioner Coto,
Yes.
Commissioner Archambault,
Yes.
Commissioner Lesson,
Yes.
Commissioner Rapp,
Yes.
Commissioner James.
Yes. Carried. Congratulations. Congratulations. Thank you. There's the director.
Very quiet at the Park District, no matters to discuss.
Thank you for your brevity. Board liaison reports.
I can go, but I'll be short. Caucus survey results are expected later this week on the caucus website. I'll definitely let people know when they're up, in case your reading list is short and you're looking for something else to look at. All of us should have received an email from Scott Myers to indicate if we are interested in continuing to serve on this board and discuss that further with the caucus, as well as providing them suggestions for other people who might be interested in serving on other boards. A lot of positions open, so definitely respond within the next week or so. And then for D36, all administrative staff roles have been filled, including new Skokie principal. They're doing some security and safety reviews and protocol changes using a third-party reporting mechanism. I don't know if that's something that we'll need to link in with at some point. Maybe JP already has, because we offer a lot of programs on their site who understands that a little bit better. And then the downsized capital improvement plan will be voted on in August with the final ballot language.
The liaison reports. All right. Now, item 13, remarks for visitors. Thank you for your patience. Would anybody like to speak?
Can hardly walk.
It's a lot of piano.
Careful.
Mary Harrison, 250 Ridge. You guys covered a lot of ground tonight. And the reason I'm here, of course, is with the elder centennial portion. But I
really think this golf thing really is a really good thing. I really think that'll be good. And I was wondering, are they gonna do anything with the par three then, as far as design? So that's good. Library Park, great, another entity and they're helping them out and getting some little reward for it, so that's good. And as far as Pro Island, it's a no-brainer. The way I see it with other entities. Because, you know, I feel very strongly about getting rid of land. So I'm going to make that clear that when we're dealing with another body that is a taxpayer body, then we should do it. I'm just wondering, I mean, I want personally no swap, but I think that headway is made tonight with people's thoughts. The problem with this particular swap, from what I see, is the demands kept coming. You know, if it was just a swap, it seemed like a good thing at the time. But the demands kept coming, and more this and more that. So I don't think that'll ever change. And I'm not in favor of some things. I would say I'm not in favor of an easement for his property. He now has almost 4 acres. I think he can figure out how to get back to his own backyard of his own easement. I don't think that we should be involved with him at all. Of course, I don't like planters. I'm for the elder peer having another look by somebody to see if anything can be done with that. I really feel this project, we need to keep the cost as low as possible. Bringing in sand is a very costly item. So, and it's not really good sand. I mean, Lloyd is a great beach, there's no question in the way it's used. But if you looked at the sand at Centennial, the quality of it, and then you looked at the sand at Lloyd, they're different sands, as we all know. So I don't see the need for that kind of beach at the Centennial Elder spot. Also, it's staffing to make it as the Elder swimming beach again. We will need more lifeguards, which is always a problem. And we don't pay our lifeguards very much. $13 an hour from what I've heard. And it just seems like a crime for somebody. I mean, we need to encourage those people to lifeguard at Winnetka. I thank you for all your considerations on all these issues. It kind of takes me back in time. There's been a lot of this, but as far as the Elder Centennial, my vote would be keep it natural, keep it as it is, work with what we have, and when we do our workshop, I would like to see the plan as it was presented the other night, if you want to continue that. But I'd also like to see the plan if we don't buy a swap to 261, that we could work with that, work at the workshop. So the other thing is we are good neighbors. We've always been good neighbors. I don't think you need to be concerned with that at all. The dog on the leash or not on the leash, Mr. Lesson? What do you recommend for your suggestion of the dogs at the beach?
I haven't gotten that far.
Oh, okay. I was just curious. You know, I've known this guy since he was about. We were neighbors. My goodness, so sometimes I think no deal is the best deal. So I think I'll leave you with that thought. And thanks for your time.
Anybody else like to speak at this time?
I'll make this really brief. Judy Rouse, everything I want to say, you already said it this way. Earlier, when you mentioned I wouldn't see the forest of the trees or whatever that is, that's all I think about in this deal. I I think I'm being totally transparent. I believe this swap wouldn't happen for many reasons. There are many reasons that you've all alluded to in terms of the mechanics and how we got to this juncture. But also, it's my opinion, and I wasn't here at the time we offered the first plan, that nobody ever envisioned selling park land. I think fundamentally it's a mistake. I understand what you're doing here, how it helps you partner with other like agencies. But in this instance, to me, it tips the balance of the cost being too high. It's undeniably the most beautiful part of the park. I live directly across from it. I feel like I should have a clicker for how many different people I see of all ages, of all abilities, whether they're strollers, dogs, whatever. And I am not a dog person. I like dogs, but I don't want to be categorized that that's why I'm in this fight. I'm not despite in this conversation. I'm in this conversation because I think it is simply one of the most beautiful parks I've ever seen. And I really hate to see us squander this opportunity to make our best beach, but go back to the plan which envisions not having a swamp at this time. And thanks for your time, and also thank you for the good work.
Hello, Scott Corley, 659 Locust. This will be very brief. A healthy park district creates the spaces that we all share together, so thank you all for your services to that end. And I'd like to offer some words of encouragement to you all, invoking the spirit of Daniel Burnham. Make big plans, aim high in hope and work. A noble, logical plan, once realized, will never die. Long after we are gone, it will be a living thing, asserting itself with ever-growing consistency. Thank you.
Bill Enquist, 476 Providence Avenue. Thank you for tonight. I actually found this evening very inspirational. And I look forward to the next workshops. And just a couple of things to think about with those workshops. I wondered, could we also discuss the top of the bluff at the same time we talk about the beach? What happens in the next round of the bluff park? And the second thing I just wondered is if we could revisit the water-based construction method versus land-based construction method, which I think would have much less impact to the neighbors. I don't know much about that, but it seemed to be a surprise to hear that. Other than that, thank you for tonight. I did want to add one other subject that is a different subject altogether. But the Park District needs to be commended, and I've been needing to do this in the Park District meeting for quite a long time. I've mentioned this to John. There is a restoration effort that you're doing, that your staff is doing, that is, I think, unbelievable. This quiet jewel in the Winnetka Park system, which is the Red Oak Savannah restoration of Crow Island Woods. It's truly remarkable. I don't know how you're all doing it. I think it must be trial and error. Every year you try things, some things must work, some things probably don't work. Each year I've been watching this more since the pandemic. To me, you go in there and it's wildlife first, nature first, but it's this unique place in Winnetka where humans and the wild come together. It's not active recreation, it's not golf or tennis or beaches. It is this remarkable jewel. And I just wanted to thank you all for doing this. And it's a quiet forest. I mean, no one talks about this. I hope the District 36 addition to Crow Island School is accommodating of this unique system, however you've designed it. And right now it's peaking. The grasses are peaking, the woods have never looked better. I just wanted to say that there are some things you're doing that are absolutely amazing, and this is one of them, so thank you very much.
That's Costa Tools.
Yeah.
That's also Costa, I should say.
That's not me, that's my staff. They're the hard workers. I wrote that down, and Phil, thank you for that. I will pass that on to them.
Anybody else like to speak? Mr. Donovan?
I am. Several things I'd like to bring up. Thank you very much for allowing us to speak at the end. That's helpful to be able to speak now. One, I'd like to talk about some maybe procedures for obtaining more input before the workshop. Because I'm thinking it would be helpful somehow to try and do that. And so I have some suggestions. Warren, I noticed you had a list of principles that you were going to be using. I was thinking it might be helpful to ask others who were intensely interested in this, if they would send you principles as well. Maybe there'd be some way to compare and contrast those. Two, I think Commissioner Rapp mentioned sort of a more customer-centric based design, and perhaps maybe the caucus survey results may reveal a greater or another way of looking at what people really want to do now at these two beaches. We had the objectives that were called out in 2016, but this is not 2016 anymore. So we have reconstruct and Lloyd Beach, which we didn't have then. So we have other things at play that may have modified that somewhat. And then I'd like to push off on Phil Hincklif's idea of having multiple different plans. I think, Austin, you said you were doing that, but it would be helpful to have some detailed cost analyses of that as well. So that was the first thing I wanted to mention. The second one I wanted to focus a little more on planner pockets. I think the term is somewhat misleading. I did a little space analysis on my house. 3 of my homes can fit on a single planner pocket. So I suggest you look at the size of these things. The name is extraordinarily misleading. These are landfills. This is a small lot. This is not a pocket. So we need to take that into account. And you probably can guess where I'm going with this. These are unprecedented structures. They haven't been built on Lake Michigan. We don't know how they're going to perform. And number two, the design that is already that it went to permit is not a design. I've designed cofferdams before with sheet piles. These did not have waivers on them. They did not have cross turnbuckle supports to tie them together so they didn't flop around. So I would suggest that, I don't know who's designing these, but so far the design, well, they're not designed. So that's another big issue. And third is a failure mechanism that the material within these sheet piles can leak out. And if it leaks out, then they fail. And the sheet piles are actually driven, they're separate members that are driven down one at a time like this and all around. And if any of those seams separate, then the soil can leak out from them. And so over time, these can weather. So I would suggest we need to be really careful with these. These are not just sort of the same kind of features that have already been tried. So anyway, so those are some comments I have. Thank you very much.
Welcome your input. Obviously we work together in the Lakefront Advisory Committee, and we'll keep doing it. The emails coming. Any other remarks? Oh, one to be read. Yep. So a resident who is very active in our community asked to have her comments read into the record, and she wants to remain anonymous. First, I want to thank you all for your hard work and for all that you are doing to support our community. Second, I am unable to attend tonight's meeting. However, I will be listening via Zoom. I wanted to share comments that I would like read into the record. Here are my comments. I support the vision of the 2030 waterfront plan and would like to see Elder and Centennial beaches combined. I also believe it was and continues to be the intent of the Winnetka Park District and Board to operate with our community's best interests at heart. These are good people who have been hired or elected based on their experience and integrity. And we do need to have a base level of trust and faith in our neighbors, volunteers, elected officials, and employees. It is extremely difficult to please everyone, and our community has become very divided on a number of issues. Unfortunately, the dialogue has become contentious, and in some instances, intimidation has been used to silence voices. Against this backdrop of despite its best intentions, the Park District and Board missed the mark in the recent execution of the land swap. The louvered wall and suboptimal transparency were missteps that I'm pleased to see being addressed as we look forward. I would urge the community, Park District, and Board to seek common ground and move forward in a productive, inclusive, and respectful dialogue that honors the original intent of the 2030 waterfront plan. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Joanna Crosses, 476 Providence. I had a question. We've been talking a lot about these planters that are way bigger than pockets. I see what the drive is on the south side, that Mr. Ishfield wants privacy and planting. But what's the reason to have it on the north side?
I would suggest you come to the workshop session and you see some different designs, different options. We're listening.
Yeah, I'm listening too. I don't know why.
Just come to the workshop session and see different alternatives.
All right, well, that, the twinning of those two planters have been in the works for forever. And if you're worried about cost, why would you have to go through the cost of having it on the north side?
Not a question and answer session. We're just taking attendance rates. But the question and answer is better served at the workshop session.
Okay, well, my other comment is, I thought that only people who actually come to this meeting see and identify themselves, get their comments put into or recorded into the record. I didn't think somebody who could write in anonymously.
So it was requested of us before this meeting, and so we reviewed it. And
Is that like a regular thing?
no,
Okay.
I don't think it's been done in 8 years that we've worked. No, first time I've seen it.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further remarks from visitors? Hearing none. Staff reports. Molly?
John gave money with the brochure coming out tomorrow. Some of you might have already received the postcard, if not in the next couple of days. I gave all of you some of our fall materials we've been working on, fall event materials along the way. There have been a few things that I haven't necessarily been pleased with. One thing we felt the program pages could be broken out a little bit better, so we've been working on that. We also have some thoughts about the waterfront 130 page that we wanted to implement shortly after the website launched, but we just feel that was the best time with everything going on with the Elder Centennial project. We're hoping to have those pages switched over by the September meeting. it will all be the same information that's out there right now, just in a better layout that will be better, a better user experience.
Thank you. These look great.
Thank you.
Really. Posta, anything like that?
A couple quick tidbits here, just in regards to projects moving forward and, possible engagement. John Peterson and I were engaged by members of the Winnetka, or is the Winnetka Club now, formerly known as the Winnetka Women's Club, regarding to give back to the community in some capacity. Had a couple initial conversations with them to better understand the request. After meeting with Denise and Linda from the Winnetka Club, they had suggested about putting a gazebo in at a park location. After further conversation and touring a couple sites with them, we landed on the sites of Maple and Elder as potential candidates for a tableland park gazebo that can give back, for an area of passive park space usage, as well as some signage to commemorate what the Winnetka Club was and how it came to be. So that's something that there's some initial discussions on. This would be a full donation to the Winnetka Park District. This would not be a cost share or anything else. But as part of this process, we would have to go through the village special use permit process for this. But I just want to make sure that with regards to transparency, that everybody knew that this was something that was coming online. Right now, I'm going to work with them on putting some cost estimating together to make sure they're comfortable with the request and what that looks like. And then formally, probably bring it back either August or shortly thereafter to the park board with a presentation showing what that could possibly look like before we make the next step of engagement with the community beyond that. So just something that kind of came about fairly recently.
Because you said Maple
or Elder.
Do we have a gazebo in existing park plans anywhere? Is one of the other. No, but in our plan, like, is it in a plan?
Northfield Park was one that was identified for gazebo previously as a phase 2 project, but that project was back in 2013. But we've identified and researched that with them as far as where our master plan was going for that next step. They didn't really, they didn't fill up those sites and that's what they were trying to do. And that's what we went for these 2 sites. I'm not sure if that helps answer your question.
Okay. I'll have to think about that a little bit further, just, in terms of the parks that are being proposed. The gazebo definitely creates a very different feel for the parks. So.
Like I said, this is just initial discussions. They wanted to know what the cost would be associated with that. So I figured do a little bit of legwork as far as some off-the-shelf kind of projects or products, and then be able to have them come and present to the park board to see if this is something that we want to move forward with. So there's a attrition to this that we would follow as it relates to the process.
Cost it approximately what size?
We talked between about like a 22 to 24 foot gazebo. That'd be similar in size to what was at Covered Woods. I believe Covered Woods before we took it down was 28 feet across. Or I don't remember if the wire is 24 or 26, but it's somewhere in the neighborhood. Correct.
Is a gazebo or some overhead structure part of the forward plan?
We have proposed that. We talked to them as far as our shade structure, our lightning protection structure for that proposal. Once again, with the Corwin family and what that park was, they wanted to separate themselves and not take away from what the park meaning is to the community. The other item is related to the Corwin Park. After further review with the village community development team talking through the permit process. After further discussion, they did suggest, based on the playground and just to make sure the colors and everything else fit contextually into the design, that they would request that we go from the designer review. So that was something that I was not anticipating. So that is set for August 18th. So next month during our park board meeting, I will fortunately have to excuse myself at 7 o'clock to go attend that meeting and present to the designer review as it relates to the park plan concept. As you are aware, we already have started to put the cart in front of the horse on this one a little bit because of pricing and timing on the playground and trying to get that done this year.
Not unbeknownst to us, we were not anticipating to have to go in front of design review. But that was something that the village staff came back with in recent that they would like us to identify.
Not a common request.
Not a common request always, so. With a larger park change out, it's more common request, but when we're, switching the play structure for play structure and the state essentially the same, as the color palette changes. That's the reason it's better color palette.
Okay, what's the status, what's the status on the information of the gazebos and gazebo tower?
So the majority of the gazebo work has been completed. I believe the mason has been completed as well. Our last step is we're gonna do work to the concrete underneath. And that's gonna be due here in the next couple of weeks as camps finish out to disrupt the camp procedure as much. So I would say within the next 3 weeks, we should have that wrapped up for the commission to get back to recognize the
Ceremony or something, give like this donation.
they're looking to do something small and internal from the conversations that we've had.
That's great, thank you.
Those are the large ones. Yeah, thank you.
Jen, anything?
One item. With the indefinite postponement of the Elder Centennial project, there's been some concerns and questions about the status of the 2020 alternate revenue bonds that were issued. Because we are tax exempt, there was a 3-year time period which just spent the majority of those proceeds. Commissioner Seaman, Commissioner Cotto, Director Peterson, myself, have been working with bond counsel to determine what our options are. The good news is that the IRS understands facts may change and delays may occur. So these will not become taxable after 3 years. So we have the option to, we also have the option to spend these on projects other than Elder Centennial, if we so choose. As long as we have enough left to pay for the work on the bluffs and those locations. So we have some leeway with those bond proceeds. This leeway also extends to some degree to the debt certificates that we agreed to at the end of 2021. We had some conversations with the bank there. They are looking at extending the draw period on those debt certificates as well. We don't have any confirmed information yet. They're going to consult with some of their colleagues this next week and come back with further information. So we're working through that process as well.
They did confirm that we do have an arbitrage constraint for investment.
Correct, yes. Now, for the arbitrage constraint doesn't begin until after the 3-year period expires.
Right.
So we actually have an opportunity between now and the 3-year period to maximize this by investing in some government backed securities. So we're going to look into doing some of that.
Okay, good.
And how soon are we gonna look into that? We talked about after the next rate increase.
Yes.
Is expected
Exactly.
shortly, you would then maximize the period of time we have left.
Exactly right. Yes. Thank you for today's next one.
Very good, thanks, Jim. You give it, man.
Nothing to add at this hour.
All right. Thank you all. Thank everybody for sticking it out for the duration. We are going to proceed here in a closed session. And I'm not sure if we have any motions. I don't expect any motions coming out of closed session. So may I have a motion to enter into closed session pursuant to sections 2C 1, 5, 6, and 11 of the Open Meetings Act. Motion to a second, roll call.
Commissioner Seaman. Commissioner Cotto.
Yes.
Commissioner Shambo.
Yes.
Commissioner Lutton. Commissioner Rapp.
Yes.
Commissioner Root.
Yes.
Commissioner James.
Yes.
All
All right.
good.
Want to take 5 or we want to return to